Good morning, everyone. This is Sam Schuckett. I'm the executive officer of the State Coastal Conservancy. I'm a little bit overdressed today for this meeting, but my neckties have expressed feelings of loneliness in my closet, so I thought I'd break one of them out today. Uh, Before we begin the meeting, I want to make some logistical announcements. Board members, oversight members, the board clerk, Annalika White, our chief counsel, Amy Roach, IT staff, and myself are all logged into Zoom as panelists. Everyone else attending this meeting, including other conservancy staff, grant applicants, members of the public, are logged in as audience members. Um, at this point, I'd like to share a video that provides some instructions for participating in the public board meeting. So go ahead and roll the video.
Welcome to the board meeting of the California State Coastal Conservancy. Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted over Zoom teleconference pursuant to the provisions of Governor's Executive Order N-2920. The chair will call upon board members, presenters, staff, and other speakers by name and ask that they speak clearly and state their names before giving comments. If you do not wish to state your name, you are not required to do so. The Conservancy will take public comments on each agenda item prior to taking action on or completing discussion of that item. The Conservancy will take public comments on matters that do not relate to a specific agenda item and closed session items during public comments on non-agenda items. If you wish to comment on a consent calendar item, please raise your hand when the chair announces the consent calendar. Before, during, or after public comment on the consent calendar, the chair may move items from the consent calendar to the regular calendar for a full hearing at either the same meeting or a later meeting. In order to make a public comment at the appropriate times in the agenda, please raise your hand using the raise hand option on Zoom or dialing *9 from a phone. Then wait to be called upon to speak. If you are attending by phone, you will be unmuted. If you are attending on Zoom, when it is your turn to speak, you will be moved into the participant panel so that you can appear on camera. You may see a blue circle on your screen as you are moved from attendee to participant. Once you are a participant, if you wish to appear on camera, you must turn your camera on. At the end of your comment, you will be moved back to attendee. Phone participants will be re-muted. Public comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. This may be adjusted by the chair depending on how many people wish to speak on a particular item. Public comments on non-agenda items will be limited to a total time of 30 minutes. If you sent us a public comment by email or voicemail before 5 p.m. yesterday, it will be entered into the record and shared with the Conservancy members, but will not be read aloud. If you submitted a comment in advance of the meeting, you do not need to repeat it during the meeting, though you are welcome to do so. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. The chat feature will be disabled for the duration of the meeting.
So we will, of course, repeat some of those instructions as the meeting progresses. It's now been a full year since shelter in place went into effect, and we have been meeting virtually this way for the whole year. I wanted to thank all of the Conservancy staff who are keeping the agency and the board meetings running during this time period when we can't work together in the same place. And I hope that the public will have patience with us because the Zoom meetings are a little clunkier than meeting in person. Anne, would you go ahead and call the roll?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Sam. Good morning, Chair Bosco and Conservancy board members. If you could please unmute yourself, I will now call the roll. All right, Ms. Noddle.
Present.
Mr. Padilla.
Present.
Mr. Cash. Mr. Cash.
He's there.
I'm here.
Ms. Gutierrez Groudon, Ms. Miller,
I'm here.
Mr. Alioto,
Here.
Chair Bosco,
Here.
and we have a quorum.
Okay, great. Doug, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Sam. And I want to welcome everyone to the March meeting of the State Coastal Conservancy. For the board members and Senator Becker, please raise your hand if you want to make or second a motion. And as Sam said, we'll be having a roll call vote on any item of business. I'd like to quickly introduce the members of the board. Our Senator Josh Becker, of course, represents the Senate and is one of our one of four officials who does that for us. And thank you for being here. Annie Nodoff was appointed by the Senate. Steve Padilla is the chairman of the State Coastal Commission, and by virtue of that serves on our board. Brian Cash represents the Resources Agency, and Secretary Crowfoot, who's one of my favorite people in the administration, does a great job. Joseph Alioto is an appointee of the governor, as am I. All right, the first item of business, did I forget it? I don't think so. Okay.
Oh, there's Gail.
You forgot me,
Gail,
Mr.
I'm
Chair.
sorry, I thought I did. Gail Miller is representing the Department
It's
of.
my fault. I figured out my internet.
Okay, well, we can see you now, Gail. All right, the first item of business is to approve the minutes of our January meeting. Does anyone want to make any additions or corrections? If not, Mr. Padilla, would you move, and Mr. Alioto second that we approve the minutes?
Happy to do so.
Okay, please call the roll. And
Yes, sir. Ms. Nodoff,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
aye.
This motion passes. The minutes is approved.
Thank you, Ann. Next, we'll go on to public comments on items that are not on the agenda. As Sam mentioned, we ask that people limit their comments to 3 minutes, and we won't take more than a half an hour on this part of the agenda. So are there any public comments?
Yeah, we've got currently 5 raised hands. I will take them in order, and I'll set my timer. First up is Roy Vanderhoek.
Mr. Vanderhoek, are you out there?
Yep.
I'm here. It took a second to get unmuted. Thanks for your patience. Do I need to do my video showing too?
No, it's up to you. That's up to you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do it. Penguins in the background there on the ceiling. Okay, so my name is Roy Vanderhoek. I'm an environmental scientist and educator. I've been coming each month recently to your meetings. I'm so glad you're doing them by Zoom. It really is democratic to do that because we don't have to travel and have hardship to come to wherever you happen to meeting. Though when you do come to LA, it's been nice. I've come to when you went to Culver City, but that was many years ago. So as an environmental scientist and educator, I care and studied and trained at a public university and Cal State University Northridge. And there's a lot of science that I learned, but there's actually something higher than science, because science is knowledge, but science doesn't have wisdom. Seeing a field that's an emerging field called native ecology, where we're relying on how indigenous peoples around the world look at ecology, and science is getting a wake-up call now, and we know that money's controlling science too, and so we're ending up with a lot of problems. And none of you are scientists, but you're supposed to use the best available science available to you. So you have a question like, what science do you trust? And what does it mean to say the best available science when you don't know where the money's coming from to pay the scientists to give you the answers that you want, they want you to hear. So it's kind of a problem. For example, the sea otter and the giant kelp are two issues that are like totally based on myth right now, and you're funding and approving funding and have approved funding for seaweed and giant kelp studies and all that. And coming back down here to Ballona wetlands, you've been putting money into the Ballona wetlands project, and it's been going down into a myth of things too. And it's a real problem, and it's hard for me to communicate that as an environmental scientist, in a sense, as an educator, but I have training in interpretation and doing the best I can. The best thing would be me to hold an otter with you and talk about it, but in a sense, or a bird, but I have that old laptop that's giving me that green background too, which is okay. It's a salt grass. There's a rare butterfly that she only lays her eggs on that salt grass, and no other species of plant. But that particular species, the wandering skipper, was proposed to be on the endangered species list in the 1970s, about 50 years ago, and it made it all the way to the Secretary of Interior's desk, Richard Nixon, Secretary of Interior, and that person decided to keep it in the drawer and not sign it. And we've had many presidents since Nixon, but we think the report has ended up in the file. And that's just an example of how things get lost with science, and it's just a mess. And you need reform. Everybody needs, we need a lot of reform. And I see you're doing that a little bit. You're doing Indigenous, Native Americans awareness and recognition. And by the way, I'm speaking to you from Tatavia and Chumash traditional lands in the North Santa Valley. We have a lawsuit against you, and Mr. Sam took it, but I'm sad about that because I really don't want to have to do that lawsuit, but
So,
that's our effort.
Roy, your time's up.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Lydia Ponce, or maybe it's Ponce. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but go ahead, Lydia. We'll move you into the speaker zone.
Thank you. Good morning. Lydia Ponce calling from Venice, also Tongva land. It's an honor to speak with you. I think this is my first time actually speaking before you. The State Conservancy, I would like to ask that you continue to uplift relationships with Indigenous California coastal Indians, which actually extends inland to all the other tribal people, and specifically that we defeat the desalination plans along our coast with the cookie cutter approach from multiple entities that are benefiting with corporate private dollars, and their profit margins are going to basically be sent even to Canada and not really even stay within the United States. But the part that kills me and kills my joy and sometimes ruins my sleep, as I live 8 blocks from the beach, is that it's a mega behemoth plan to kill the ocean, to continue to kill the ocean and not heal the ocean. And so we don't want a desalination plant in Huntington Beach, not in Monterey Bay, and certainly the future has called that they have their eyes on El Segundo. Now, as far as Ballona wetlands, it's $12 million. I think that this is fitting to restore some of the relationships that has been muddled, prevented, and poisoned with the Indigenous people here. You should break off some of that funding to provide reparations for the Indigenous people, to teach and to give the 7 generations forward some kind of hope and instill that relationship in them, which is void of consumerism and definitely along the lines of preservation and conservation. Are you committed to minimizing land ruin? I have to ask. And the last part is that I have several beautiful, strange birds coming to sing in my backyard, my front yard, my side yard. I only leave water. I don't know what these creatures eat. But today, dear people, I was visited by 3 hawks, one that sat perched on the sign for the stop sign, and the other 2 were high up above on the poles. And I just have to say, I don't speak for them. I'm not trying to do our Lorax approach. I don't speak for anyone but myself. We need to get right back to the evolutionary part of everyone's health, all of our relations, the ones that fly, the ones that swim, and the ones that creepy crawl. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Next is Oh, Marcia Hanscom is next. Yeah, so I guess she already got moved.
Ms. Hanson, are you out there?
Well,
Looks like she dropped off.
Okay, well, the next hand up is, she might come back. Walter Lamb is the next hand up. Okay.
Sorry, yeah, I think it's taking a little while for folks to be able to get in and unmute. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're here.
Yeah, great.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Walter Lamb. I'm representing the Vine Wetlands Land Trust, and I've also been coming to the last few meetings. And I think it was 2 meetings ago that I suggested that your staff give you an overview of all the money that's been spent in the past, just so that everyone's on the same page as to what's been spent, what was it spent on. And I think that's important regardless of any future expenditures. When you put, I think over $12 million into a project, I think, starting in 2004, late 2004, it's good to get an update. We do think that there is probably several $million still needed just to complete the planning and permitting, which is exponentially more than was originally budgeted. And there have been a lot of allocations. The one I would specifically, call out today, and I think it's in the packet that I submitted a bunch of records, hopefully they were shared with you, is the one from 2007, which was for $1.5 million. And the description of that allocation is quite clear that it was for everything. It was for the whole EIR and the permitting. And then in 2012, there was $6.25 million that didn't really even reference the 2007 disbursement. And that again was for everything. And it's just right in the contracts. It was for all the submittals of the 408 permit. And so now we think if there's money that comes back, for you to allocate again, just for sort of a basic accounting purpose, it's really important that you understand those past expenditures. And we really want to, I know sometimes it must seem like, we're just kind of pounding at the door, and it is because this is a place that I think a lot of people really care about. We really would like to work collaboratively with you. We can't go back in time and fix past mistakes, but if we recognize them and then work forward, that's a productive way forward. If we're not recognizing the mistakes and discussing the mistakes, that kind of creates a continued, adverse situation that I don't think really helps anybody. So again, my request would be that at the May meeting, to have just an informational item on the agenda for past expenditures, make sure that happens not on the same day that you're being asked to approve more money. And then also to think about other ways that money could be spent. I mean, this has been now an ecological reserve for almost 17 years, and it's not in great shape. There's a lot that can be done there right now prior to any large scale restoration. We think that that's quite overdue. So it'd be great just to have you thinking about other alternatives and other things that you could potentially be doing with these funds to improve the current condition of the ecological reserve. So I thank you very much. That's, speak to you again maybe at the next meeting. Really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Lisa Levinson, and then Marcia Hanscom will be after that. So go ahead, Lisa, as soon as you're unmuted.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. So I'm Lisa Levinson with In Defense of Animals, an international animal protection nonprofit with 250,000 supporters and 25,000 in California. 12,000 of our supporters signed petitions to protect Ballona wetlands and stop the counterfeit restoration project that would bulldoze the area. We're concerned that public money spent on our wetlands would have negative climate change impacts. Studies show that carbon storage or sequestration works best when habitats are kept intact. For this reason, the so-called restoration project would contribute towards more climate change impacts. This includes sea level rise, which the Conservancy has committed to minimizing. Defend Bayona Wetlands drafted the Gentle Restoration Plan to foster species recovery and improve public access without bulldozing the reserve. We love the Gentle Restoration Plan because it forms recovery teams to recover the roadrunner, the jackrabbit, California quail, horned lizard, garter snake, bald eagle, snow goose, sandhill crane, and the southern sea otter to Bayona. We also like the implementation of docent and youth ranger programs to teach respect and sustainability principles. The plan opens Fiji Way public access and improves existing walking trails within the reserve for also improving public access and learning opportunities. Please read the 20-point plan at defendbayonawetlands.org. We urge you not to grant any more funds to the counterfeit restoration. Instead, we encourage you to consider supporting the gentle restoration, which can accomplish all of the goals of the counterfeit restoration, except refurbishing of the gas storage facilities beneath the wetlands. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Okay, and next, and unless I see any more hands go up, last will be Marcia Hanscom.
Go ahead, Marcia. Okay.
Hello. Good morning, honorable commissioners, board members, staff. Marcia Hanscom. I'm speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club. Sierra Club has been involved with the Bayona wetlands for about 30 years. And I, on behalf of Sierra Club, sat in the office of Governor Gray Davis a few months before he was unfortunately recalled. But it was during that time that he helped us acquire this land and put $140 million into acquiring the Bayona wetlands. $140 million, that money was not put into acquiring land that was dead and dying. It was there because there were ecological values that are still there to this day. And in fact, that have improved because the private landowners are no longer coming in with bulldozers here and there to do things that we would often have to go to the Coastal Commission about because they were enforcement issues. So my point being is that you've heard some things from your staff in recent months about how bulldozers are so important to doing restorations. Well, I would beg to differ that this particular land is different. I've never seen a project have the kind of excavation proposed and complete land alteration proposed anywhere on the Southern California coast that is planned here when you have 7 species on the endangered species list that rely on this land, that we have dozens of species on just the California species list of species of special concern. When I've been at Coastal Commission meetings where even just one of those, the white-tailed kite, has been present, the project is stopped, or at least completely, there is nothing near where the white-tailed kite thrives and uses the habitat that is allowed. And the commission would then say, you've got to redo this project. You can't harm this animal. It is on the special species concern list for the state of California. So how this project got through to this day, over 12 years of over $12 million money continuing to be thrown at a project that's completely ecologically illiterate. I can tell you how I watched it happen, but I just can't figure out why it continues. There is not one elected official who is for this project. Not one has stood up and said, this is a great project. Why? Because they looked at it and they know there is huge controversy. Please don't spend any more money on this and consider something different. Thank you.
Thank you.
That appears to be the end of public comment on non-agenda items. I don't see any more hands up.
Okay, thank you, Sam. And we'll now move on to the consent items. Are there any items that should be removed from the consent calendar? If not, Ms. Nodoff, do you want to move approval and second, perhaps?
Yes, I move approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, Ann, would you call the roll?
I'm sorry, who's second?
We need a second.
Joe Alioto did. He didn't know it. But
I voluntarily second.
Thank you. All right. Ms.
if you
Nodoff,
don't hurry and raise your hands, I'm going to just appoint you.
Got to move fast around here.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye,
This motion passes. Item number 4 is approved.
thank you. Okay, we'll go on to our executive officer's report. Sam?
Thank you, Chair Bosco, and good morning again to everyone. We have 3 items on the EO report today. As you recall, last year you adopted a new justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion policy for the Coastal Conservancy, and one of the action items out of that was to take a look at and potentially redo some of our project selection criteria. Julian Nesbitt, who is a Civic Spark Fellow, has been working with us along with Mary Small on that. And Julian and Mary, I think mostly Julian, are going to kick the process off today at this meeting.
Thank you, Sam, and good afternoon, all board members. As Sam mentioned, my name is Julian Nesbitt, and I'm a Civic Spark AmeriCorps Fellow with the State Coastal Conservancy. I've been in that position since September, and I have been in charge with Mary Small and others in helping update the project selection criteria. As Sam mentioned, one of the implementation actions under the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion guidelines has been to update it to reflect those guidelines that address our funding programs, meaningful engagement, and working with California's tribes. And it's also an opportunity to align the criteria related to climate change with current state policy and guidance. And it's also just an opportunity to clarify and clean up the criteria and make it more relevant to the board and staff. And so the purpose of the presentation today is to get feedback from the board about the new criteria, if you have any. And so on top of that, one of our other steps was to use the staff to vet the draft criteria with existing grantees and partners. And so we've also incorporated that input into this initial draft as well. And so the idea is that following this presentation, we'll revise the criteria accordingly based on any comments from today, and we'll post it online to solicit broad public input, which we'll explain more later. And so now I'll just give a quick overview about what the new product selection criteria looks like. So we are proposing to separate it into 2 different parts. One is the selection criteria, and the other is the eligibility criteria. And so the idea with the eligibility criteria is that every single conservancy project will be required to meet all of these applicable criteria no matter what. So that includes things like being consistent with the purposes of the funding source, be consistent with the enabling legislation, having CEQA compliance, having site ownership / control, long-term management, and things like that. And so each of those eligibility criteria are required again for every single project, no matter what. Now with the selection criteria, they're not all required, but the idea is that we'll use them to prioritize projects for our conservancy funding. And so given the broad range of project types funded by the Conservancy, we know that not all criteria will be applicable to every single kind of project. But the idea again is that we expect applicants to incorporate the themes of the criteria wherever feasible. And so we have 6 of those, and they are extent to which the project helps Conservancy accomplish the objectives in the strategic plan, the project is a good investment of state resources, the project benefits will be sustainable or resilient over the project lifespan, they'll deliver multiple benefits and significant positive impact, They'll be planned with meaningful community engagement and broad community support. And then the programs and products will implement tribal engagement wherever possible. Now, to go into some of those in a little more detail, as I mentioned before, we recommend changing the climate change related criteria. Currently, it references an executive order from 2013 and it's related to sea level rise. So in the proposed new criteria, we've broadened it to ensure that project benefits are sustainable or they're resilient over the project lifetime. And then also the Conservancy has long supported multi-benefit projects, but this time around it's been revised to specifically describe both natural resource benefits and community benefits. And also in the memo in front of you, with this, we've tried to provide more concrete examples of how our projects benefit communities in multiple ways. So that's things like improving public health, adding recreational amenities, creating jobs and job training, and so forth. And then also, as I said, some of the proposed criteria implement the JEDI guidelines, especially those last two, the ones related to the meaningful community engagement and the tribal engagement. And as recognized and explained in that memo, different project types will be expected to have different levels of community engagement. And with tribal engagement, it's the same idea. We're expecting variance with the different types of projects. But however, all Conservancy projects that come our way are on former tribal lands, so early efforts should be made to try to engage tribes and to see what can possibly come out of that. And as you'll also see in the memo, we've specifically referred to underserved or frontline communities. And so as defined in the JEDI guidelines, these include communities that are economically disadvantaged, historically underrepresented in the environmental policymaking process. They carry disproportionate environmental and health burdens. They're vulnerable to climate change impacts due to lack of resources, or they're severely burdened by housing costs and increased risk of displacement. So we wanted to clarify that. And so that's a little overview of the actual criteria themselves. And I'll just reiterate what I said before, that after this presentation, should we be approved, our next step is to revise criteria to incorporate these comments. And then the draft criteria will be posted on the Conservancy website for public comment, and we'll create an anonymous online comment form for that. And then that public comment period will be open until July 1st. And then meanwhile, on April 16th, we're planning to host a webinar on the draft criteria for the public and other stakeholders. So we'll have an opportunity to get more feedback there as well and incorporate that. And at the end of the comment period, again, July 1st, we'll revise criteria as appropriate based on all the input that's been received. And the idea is that by the next September board meeting, we'll be ready to present the final new project selection criteria to the board for possible adoption. And that's all I have to say about the criteria. And thanks for listening. And I welcome any questions or comments if you have any.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? I would propose that we, any comments are fine now, but I think in terms of getting into this deeply, probably we should review everything first and then have a time when we spend quite a bit of time discussing it. But for now, Julian's here to answer any question. Annie?
I was just going to say, I have had a chance to look it over. I support the idea of having a more in-depth discussion. I just want to say that the oral presentation that you just gave gives a broader emphasis and a more focused emphasis to equity and inclusion than I thought kind of came from the written product. I was thinking that I kind of thought that there should be higher up in the document, more focused commitment to diversity and inclusion. So I'll take another look at it, but that was, I definitely, your verbal presentation was, I think, captured the spirit of our policy more fully than I was conveyed in the written document.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Alioto.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Julian, first, I want to echo Ms. Nodoff's comments. That was a very eloquent and succinct presentation. So I think just really, really well done. I think my comment or question is also kind of related to what you just heard. And my question is, are the selection criteria, are those discretionary criteria, or are these required criteria in order for you to consider a project? The eligibility criteria appear to me to be non-discretionary. In other words, if you don't meet all of those criteria, then that project simply will not be considered. And my question is, are the selection criteria also requirements, or are these discretionary criteria that allow you to prioritize projects, but projects may not necessarily have to meet each of the selection criteria?
Right. So the selection criteria are discretionary, so they're not required, but the idea is that we encourage trying to make those happen, and we recognize that if they don't happen, they can't happen with the scope of your project, then they won't happen. But the idea is that to try and improve on that so that they'll get prioritized for that funding.
Okay.
I think those were very good questions, Mr. Eliotto. And I had another one too that we don't need to get into too deeply, but even on the eligibility, I noticed you said CEQA compliance. Sometimes projects don't have compliance when they're, when they're first applied for. And so I'm wondering about more of the mechanics of those kind of things. Because on eligibility, you don't want good projects just simply to not be eligible because of some timing issue and where they are with the project. But again, I think maybe we can go over all those things once we've had a chance to really delve into your work. And thank you, Mary and Julian, for your work on this. It sounds like it's going to be very exciting for us.
Thank you.
Doug, it looks like we have one public comment on this, but before we do that, what I'm hearing is that you'd like us to schedule a time for a fuller discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we all need time to go over this in detail and then to have a full discussion of it, because it's very important. It'll be a good project for us all to be involved in, but we have to understand what we're getting.
Okay. Julian, remind me, when are we doing the public webinar?
The webinar I have for April 16th.
Okay. So I think once we do that and we get more public comment, then we could have a, discussion that included what we heard from the public.
Yes.
Yeah, and I see that outlined in the schedule that you would be presenting the final criteria to the board in September.
Right.
Which is probably when that discussion would take place, from what I understand your timeline to be, right?
Well, I wonder if we should give ourselves time, though, between, assuming that let's call it a hearing that we have, recommend some changes. Wouldn't we want a period of time then before we finally vote on it?
Yeah, I'd recommend having a board discussion again before, after the public comment has been collected and before the adoption meeting in September. Whether we can cram that into the scheduled May meeting or have to set up a special meeting for that, we'll need to think about, because no one likes 4-hour Zooms. So
I would like to have it, Sam, while you're still with us too. You have, of course, an institutional memory that none of us have. So
I think we should change that to while Sam is still executive officer instead of while he is still with us.
Yeah, because I'm not actually planning on dying anytime soon. It's just
forgive me for using COVID language.
Yeah, so we'll Mary and Julian and I will caucus after the meeting, and we'll figure out when would be a good time, how to best, schedule a good discussion.
And could you just double check that we all have the invite to the public comment period to the public meeting on the 16th, so we can listen in if we can. Okay, thanks.
Definitely. Doug, there seem to be 2 public comments on this. I'm assuming that it's for this item. First one is Marcia Hanscom. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to the staff for this. I think you did a great job, and I want to delve into it a little bit more too. But I think that some of the things you have here would have been very helpful in previous situations. I also think that it's great to get, I'm wondering if maybe an idea could be that you could have a checklist even that staff could use with this, so that when the Conservancy Board looks at these projects, they'll actually see whether, whether it's a requirement or not, that, this one got a higher mark than the other and why, so that this board in the future is not just a rubber stamp for bond money to be approved per staff, because that has been my experience, that it really has been, that there's never any controversy. The board never really looks at these things differently than the staff. And I'd like to see this board looking at our money, our public money, a little differently, like the Coastal Commission does. For instance, last week at the Coastal Commission, there was a very highly controversial issue related to Oceano Dunes. And while staff had one recommendation, the commission took it further, because the commission at the Coastal Commission, they really think about these things and look at more detailed information than just do whatever staff wants. So that's what I would like to see. And I also would like to see, this public support is very, very important. When the $6.5 million was approved by this board for Ballona, Fran Pavley, who was a senator at the time, was told by the Bay Foundation staff that Ted Lieu, our senator at the time, supported it when he did not. She didn't find out until later that he did not. So there needs to be this part about public support needs to be clearer and needs to be something that you can really delve into as board members. And same with the issue related to sea level rise. The things that are coming out about whether or not this Ballona project would help with sea level rise, completely opposite than the facts. So this has to be something where you have some backup to the assertions that are being made. And again, I really think that you're going on the right track with this. So thank you.
Thank you. Robert Vanderhoek is next.
Hello again, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I thought Mr. Schuckett did a very good, excellent executive director's report. I like that you bring in a guest, your staff. That's a nice dimension to have Julian speak. And I noticed Mary Small, so a shout out to Mary Small. I've known her for 17 years related to the Ballona wetlands work. And I would like to address the few minutes I have on Native American Indigenous peoples' cultures and cultural resource management and tribal involvement that I think is going in a good path. I'd like to compliment you on that. And to get into a focus on that a little bit, I did work as a cultural resource manager for the federal government for more than 10 years. And I worked with Native American tribal peoples in Northeastern California, Modoc County, the Hachamawi Pit River peoples and their leaders. And then I've worked in San Luis Obispo County with Chumash and Paiute in the Owens Valley when I was with the Bureau of Land Management. And I'm not treading on thin ice because I don't speak for Native American peoples, but I have some insights on how to interact with them. I think the matrilineal aspect is really important. There's a lot of male energy too in Native American tribal peoples. And if I look at Ballona in specifics, I saw some real issues that happened there over the last 20 years and picking the wrong people to be designees. And there's a law that requires under CEQA and federal laws that you have to include a tribal person or designated person in Army Corps of Engineers has to do that, as well as the federal agency. And often the wrong kind of Native American person is selected, and it's usually male-oriented person, a single individual, and it ends up causing rifts. There's a really nice person named Tina Calderon that I did a blessing, was able to be participating in a blessing ceremony and song recently at Baiona. And she's a woman, matrilineal, Chumash and Tongva, and she's a wisdom keeper, clearly. And she told a very sad story about access, public access, her as a tribal culture, that she can't collect plants for weaving or for basketry or medicinal purposes. She has to go through a whole process. So she either has to be illegal in gathering the plants, like on the Baiona, at the Baiona wetlands, or she has to go to places where she has permission on private lands. And we're not doing enough. And it's really an afterthought still. That's part of the problem with CEQA. It's only really an afterthought still to have approval, like even if you find an archaeological site, it comes in after the fact. It doesn't come into the discretionary and non-discretionary. Thank you, Mr. Alioto, for bringing that up and following up on Anne's thought about that. You really need to make it non-discretionary. It has to really kill the project if you haven't really genuinely included tribal people. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to use the prerogative of the chair now to ask that we limit all comments from here on out to 1 minute. And I'd like the folks, we like to hear comments, but I think people should be respectful of our time, and the same people should not feel the necessity to comment on practically every item that we have. So let's move forward from here on that basis.
All right, Mr. Chair, the timer is reset to 1 minute. The next speaker is Lisa Carlin.
Okay, let's go on to the next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are, Lisa.
All right, wonderful. Okay, I just wanted to make some comments that have to do with the gentle restoration alternative for the gentle alternative for Baiona wetlands. It's a 20-point plan, and it's on the website, on our website about bionawetlands.org. And this gentle restoration plan, I think, would really satisfy the needs of everyone, including
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm not sure these comments have to do with the item that we're discussing right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Next is Jane Velez Mitchell.
Next.
I'm unmuting. I'm here. I'm here. Thank you, sir. Okay, I think this criteria is fantastic. And it does relate to Baiona in the sense that the destruction, the bulldozing, the excavation of LA's last coastal wetlands achieves none of this. Minimization of greenhouse gas emissions, quite the contrary. The entire boondoggle to excavate LA's last coastal wetlands is to benefit SoCal Gas. So sea level rise vulnerability, I think, yes, let's mitigate that. But that boondoggle is not going to achieve that. In fact, the Army Corps of Engineers has pointed out that there were many errors. It's riddled with errors, this questionable plan to excavate the Baiona wetlands. It's riddled with errors regarding flood levels. So I look at all this, and say, these are wonderful,
yes,
but why not apply these to this issue? The people do not want to.
I just want to, Mr. Chair, what I don't want to do is disrespect other applicants, because we need to understand the full scope of how we can apply criteria statewide. So I think if there were an issue for Baiona wetlands, that's actually a different issue. I think what we want to understand is kind of writ large, how the state needs to prioritize different types of funding, because those are the questions that will constantly be coming before the state. So I respect and understand that there are a lot of feelings and passion, but I do think it's important that we understand how it will impact more than one project in the state.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go on with your report, Sam.
Thanks. Well, that does appear to be the end of public comment on this item. The legislature is making up for lost ground in last year. It's been a busy year, and Debbie Ruddick has a mercifully brief legislative report to deliver.
Okay, Deborah, go ahead.
I can't see how to turn on my video on this screen.
We can see you. I can see you.
That'll be good enough. Oh, wait, here it is. Start my video. There we go.
There you are again.
So, good morning. I'd like to respect your time. I see you have a very busy agenda ahead. I just want to point out that today is actually the beginning of the legislative recess, spring recess. And the legislature will reconvene on April 5th. The very next deadline that's kind of important is April 30, which is the last day for policy committees to report to fiscal committees, fiscal bills introduced in the House of Origin. So I'm not going to go through all these bills. As you can see, there's a ton of them. But I just want to mention some bills that have been gutted and amended to impact us. And one is SB 604, Senator Hueso, which would have the state conservancies establish climate resilience programs. Fortunately, we already have one, but the new twist is to introduce workforce development policies and program. And then there's AB 125, which is a food security bond by Assemblymember Rivas, which would allocate $30 million to Coastal Conservancy for grants and expenditures related to commercial fishing infrastructure on the coast. SB 1 has been amended. It's Senator Atkins. It would provide that the OPC would coordinate with the coastal zone management agencies and State Lands Commission, including us, on a program to assist local agencies and regions to prepare for sea level rise, and would allocate $100 million a year for projects. Then there's AB 721, which we're somewhat concerned about. We just noticed this bill. It would allow affordable housing developments to override restrictions on the use of property. And it's private restrictions. We're unclear what that means, but we're concerned that it might allow affordable housing developments on land over which we have offers to dedicate. It may apply to conservation easements, but in any case, we're going to be working with the author's office and others to provide amendments.
Who's the author on that one?
Sorry?
Who's the author?
Gosh, I don't have that handy.
Okay, I just want to say that I think that affordable housing is a crisis in California, and we should examine how to balance those things and not necessarily reject them.
Absolutely. We just want to make sure that if we're funding conservation easements, give money to a nonprofit organization or to a city, and then it's an affordable housing project can trump the purposes for which the monies were spent. So we want to make sure, we certainly want to balance. We certainly, I know Sam and I support affordable housing, but we want to make sure that it protects the Conservancy's interest in the properties. So
well, ironically, time and time again over the years, one of the reasons we justify entering into conservation easements is people will say, yeah, they could put a subdivision there. How many times have we heard that? Especially like in Marin, where, we'll set aside whole areas based on the fact that the owners could put more housing there. So in a way, we've sort of, in our own way, been complicit for the right reasons, but we've been complicit in what may be the problem.
Yes, so somebody working on the bill, told us that the intent really is to keep, to prohibit the use of conservation easements to prevent affordable housing, right? I mean, that of course is questionable, to take steps, it's a NIMBYism issue. So we don't want to facilitate that, but we do want to make sure that we're protecting existing easements and protect the right to conserve properties without threat of future development, I think.
Ms. Ruddick,
yeah.
just quickly, could you tell me the number of that bill again and whether it's a
AB 721, And I'm going to be amending my report to include these new bills so that you can click and link if you'd like. So yeah, so it's an interesting bill, and there's a slew of affordable housing bills and ADU bills this year, and it's desperate. It's desperate where I live. I know it's desperate all over California. So I totally hear you, Annie. You know, we're going to be careful here.
I just want to look at things in a very inclusive, balanced light.
Absolutely. And so I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about any of the bills on the list.
Any questions for Ms. Ruddock? If not, thank you, Deborah.
You're most welcome. Have a great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. The last thing to report on is the search for a new Conservancy Executive Officer, and that will be Brian and Annie, although I think we can also bring Johanna Collins in for that as well.
Yeah, so as you might recall, Brian and I have asked, we're asked to be subcommittee working with staff to develop the job description and outreach strategy to figure out how we're going to fill Sam's big shoes and get cast the widest net we can to get top talent. Joanna has done a great job of pulling together a very impressive list for the outreach. And we've put together a whole, built on and updated the capacities that we're looking for from last time we were looking for an executive officer. So I think it's updated and looks good. We're just about to post that pending some word from the governor's office on salary level that Brian is working on. I don't know if you have any updates on that, Brian, or Johanna, you want to add anything to that, but we're moving forward.
Yeah, the information's at the governor's office, and we're just waiting for feedback from them on salary level. And then once we have that information, we'll be able to move forward.
Good. So when do you expect the announcement to come out for people to apply?
As soon as we hear back from the governor's office on salary, we're pretty much ready to go. So once we hear back, then we can start posting.
Yeah, and we were looking at the end of April for a deadline for applications. I think we're going to probably have to extend that now because it's taken a while to get this number, but we're trying to get to reflect the cost of living in the Bay Area. We're trying to get a salary level that helps reflect, accommodate that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Sam, is that it for your report?
That concludes my report.
Well, thank you very much.
The one other thing I was going to say, Joanne has put together like a one-page flyer, and we will make sure that we get that to everybody once we finalize it.
Okay. Let's see.
Could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Are there efforts in place to do the best that we can to get as diverse a pool as possible among the applicants?
Yes, I was really impressed with the list that Joanna has put together for outreach. I think, we have a pretty rich database to draw upon given our project applicants, and she's done a good job of pulling all those together, but more is always better. So that's why I want to make sure everybody on the board has all the information they need to get out to their networks as well.
Maybe if you get the salary up high enough, we can keep Sam. That would be my preference.
And then you won't have to fill my Crocs.
All right, we're now ready to go on to the project portion.
Wait, I have to stop for a minute. We have a bow tie and we have Crocs. It might be the first time I've ever seen it.
This is Zoom meeting,
Yeah.
couture.
You look like Khrushchev there for a minute. I thought you were going to bang it on the table.
Right. Or a millennial. Sam. But wait, just because of the comments about salary and I do want to kind of make sure that salaries are actually set by the state. So, I think what we're trying to do is see if there can be some consistency across conservancies, because this isn't the only conservancy that'll unfortunately have some turnover. So just to maybe add some clarity to what that looks like. So I hope that's helpful. Maybe not.
But state salaries are also geared to, there's some adaptability to location, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I
Probably
think
not as much as,
yeah.
not as much as I think we would all like. So I just don't want there to be any kind of confusion from the board around that process.
All right. Okay, we'll go on to the first project on our agenda, which is the South Coast, and Sam Janicus will be presenting that.
Good morning, Chair Bosco and members of the Conservancy Board. My name is Sam Janicus, and I'll be presenting the Bayshore Bikeway Barrio Logan Segment Construction Project to you today. Staff recommends that the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $350,000 to the San Diego Association of Governments to construct the Bayshore Bikeway Barrio Logan segment in the Barrio Logan neighborhood of the City of San Diego in San Diego County. The Bayshore Bikeway is a proposed 24-mile bikeway around San Diego Bay that also serves as the California Coastal Trail through this portion of San Diego County. Approximately 16 miles of the bikeway has been constructed as a Class 1 bikeway separated from motor vehicle traffic. The Barrio Logan segment will complete another 2.5 miles of Class 1 bikeway, one of the last major gaps. The Barrio Logan neighborhood is just southeast of downtown San Diego, and the proposed Barrio Logan segment begins just south of the San Diego Convention Center at Park Boulevard, seen in red on both maps here. The Barrio Logan community consists of approximately 1,000 acres and houses about 4,200 people, 71% of whom are Latinx. The 2015 median household income was $26,669. The community contains 7.5 acres of parkland and 365 feet of access to San Diego Bay. The proximity of residential development to industrial activity results in air pollution and noise impacts to area residents. Leaving the convention center area and downtown, Harbor Boulevard and the future bikeway enter the working side of San Diego Bay. There is currently little intentional landscaping in this segment. Harbor Boulevard is a thoroughfare 2 and parking area for the working port. And while there are bike lanes, the proximity to parked cars and traffic creates significant risk. It is a heavily used transportation corridor, used by vehicles, light rail, bicycles, and pedestrians. Though it would be hard to argue that the bicycle and pedestrian experience is a positive one in this area. If approved, the Conservancy funds will enable Sandag to include urban greening components in the Barrio Logan segment. This series of photos shows the existing conditions on the left and the proposed bikeway on the right. These urban greening components will make the bikeway more enjoyable for users by adding shade and planted areas. The components will have the dual function of also working to filter runoff that enters Choyas Creek in San Diego Bay. These will include bioswales and Filterra tree boxes where possible. The bioswales and tree boxes will be positioned as part of the separation of the bike lanes from vehicular traffic. The Barrio Logan segment will add 2.5 miles to the Bayshore Bikeway and will provide an alternative to vehicular transportation in a heavily used area of the Port of San Diego. This segment also serves Naval Base San Diego and is supportive of their multimodal access strategy that includes a bike share program for travel to and on base. The southern end of the segment serves the base. The bikeway will provide Barrio Logan residents with an opportunity for physical activity for its own sake, providing access to San Diego Bay along the downtown waterfront promenade and the Embarcadero to the north, and to parks, beaches, and trails to the south. The project will allow Barrio Logan residents to use the Bayshore Bikeway to connect to the Planchoyas Creek Bike Path, the Sweetwater River Bike Path, and the trail system in the Otay River Valley Regional Park. It will also provide access to San Diego Bay National Wildlife Refuge and marinas and parks around the bay. The Barrio Logan segment connects to the 32nd Street to Vesta Street segment to the south, also funded in part by the Conservancy and seen here. The project builds 2.5 miles of the California Coastal Trail and is supported by Senate President Pro Tempore Tony Atkins, Senator Ben Hueso, San Diego County 1st District Supervisor Nora Vargas and the County Board of Supervisors, the cities of San Diego, National City, and Coronado, and the San Diego Bike Coalition. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions now.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions for Sam? All right. Are there any public comment? Oh, go ahead, Steve.
No, Mr. Chairman, I'll wait till after public comments if there are any.
All right. Are there any public comments?
Yeah, we appear to have one public comment on this item, and that is Roy Vanderhoek.
That'll be 1 minute too.
Yeah. So we need to move Roy into the panelists. There we go. Here he comes. There he is.
Hi, I totally approve, Chair, Mr. Bosco, that it should be 1 minute. I did speak already 2 times at a nice time, and I ran over on my time. I apologize for that. I don't want to, I'll be much less than a minute, I hope here. I approve of this project. It's always good to see access. I don't know that much about the specifics. I was having some issues with the Zoom, so I didn't get to hear all of the presenters, Sam's report, but I think others have, and there's been a delay time in when we get promoted to speaker panelists, but just so you why that's a little bit delayed, but I'm still glad for the democracy, and that's what access is about too, is democracy and for everyone to get to participate. So I'm a big fan of access. I bicycled all the way to the Oregon border and back to LA as an 18-year-old after high school. Got to see the coast firsthand. I hugged the coast north and southbound. It made a difference in my life, of course. So I think access is always very important. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Padilla, did you want to make a comment?
I just would say that this segment enhancement is really important. I'm happy to move approval of the resolution.
All right. Ms. Miller, do you want to second it? Okay. Annie, will you, or Ann, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Nodoff?
Aye.
Mr. Padilla?
Aye.
Mr. Cash? I think that's an aye.
I don't think he's on, Annie, or Ann, sorry. Brian isn't on, I don't think.
Okay. And that's
Brian
fine.
had to, this is when Brian had to step off for a little bit.
Okay. Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Aliotto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passed. Item number 6 is approved.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, we'll go on to item 7, and Sam Jenikis will present that as well.
Good morning, Chair Bosco and members of the Conservancy Board. My name is Sam Jenikis, and I'll be presenting the Matilaha Dam Ecosystem Restoration Project Camino Cielo Bridge Design to you today. Staff recommends that the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $734,730 to the County of Ventura to conduct planning and to prepare designs and environmental documentation for the replacement of the Camino Cielo Bridge over the Ventura River in unincorporated Ventura County. The Camino Cielo Bridge is located at the intersection of Highway 33 and Camino Cielo in the Upper Ventura River watershed. This watershed lies in the northeastern part of Ventura County, approximately 80 miles from Los Angeles. At least 65 special status wildlife species, 54 special status plant species, and 6 sensitive natural communities have been documented in these reaches of the Ventura River watershed. The primary species to benefit from the future replacement of the Camino Cielo Bridge, as well as the broader Matilija Dam ecosystem restoration project, will be the federally endangered Southern California steelhead. The Camino Cielo Bridge is a key component of the Matilija Dam ecosystem restoration project. The release of sediment following the removal of Matilija Dam is expected to raise the riverbed in the reaches directly below the dam. This will bury the current Camino Cielo crossing, making replacement a critical component of the ecosystem restoration project. The Camino Cielo Bridge Design Project will develop up to 70% design plans, specifications and estimates, and environmental documentation for construction of a new bridge to replace the existing low-flow river crossing constructed with multiple concrete box culverts. The new bridge project is necessary to manage increased sediment flows following the removal of Matilija Dam. The new bridge will be designed to resolve multiple issues. It will lessen current and future concerns with increased sediment transport pre and post dam removal, will enhance steelhead migration through the Camino Cielo Reach, and avoid the current need for in-stream repairs and maintenance after major storm events. The new bridge will provide unimpeded access to existing residences south of the Ventura River, which now rely on an emergency pedestrian crossing when the current bridge is unpassable. That crossing is seen here. The proposed project enjoys broad support, including the support of Senator Monique Limon, Assemblyman Steve Bennett, County Supervisor Matt Levere, Resources Legacy Fund, Pew Charitable Trusts, Ventura Land Trust, Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, California Trout, Surfrider Foundation, Matilija Coalition, Patagonia, and the Ventura River Watershed Council. This project builds on significant prior and current investment by the California Natural Resources Agency, including a combined $30 million of investment from the Wildlife Conservation Board, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Coastal Conservancy. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions for Sam? Probably one of our greatest projects overall, I think. Are there public comments, Sam?
Yes, there appears to be one. Robert Vanderhoek.
Mr. Vanderhoek, I remember the second part of what I announced is that please select one or at the most 2 items that you want to comment on. You can't comment on every single item that we have because we just simply don't have the time. It's not any commentary on you or your comments, but it just simply, our board can't take the time for you to comment on everything. So we're going to go ahead with our agenda here.
Am I speaking then on this last time?
Pardon? All right, go ahead for your last time. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. As an environmental scientist and an educator and a specialist in hydrology, I worked 5 years in the federal government also as a hydrologic technician with stream and river projects in the United States and the Department of Agriculture. I think I have some wisdom here in addition to science to present. And that is that the steelhead trout, which is endangered, doesn't need the dam to survive, and it's not going to help with its extinction. The issue here is that the steelhead trout is also a landlocked fish. It doesn't have to be in the ocean. And in several places in Southern California, the steelhead trout is already landlocked and is doing fine. And it doesn't help the species to get out of endangerment to do this. And it's there's going to be all kinds of erosion when the dam is removed. I don't think you've probably adequately recorded these as historic sites to be on the National Register of Historic Places, which would allow you to have this become a national park in the future. The shade of the old bridge is really important to keep. This bridge probably helps the steelhead trout if you keep it. And there's so much more I could have said, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion that we approve this item? Ms. Miller moves, Ms. Nodoff seconds, right? Okay, Anne, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Nodoff,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Mr. Cash. I don't think he's back. Chair Bosco,
Aye.
and this motion passes. Item 7 is approved.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you,
Sam.
Sam. I'm sorry, we have 2 Sams here. Okay, we're going on now to item 8 with Rodrigo Garcia. Rodrigo?
Good morning, Chairman Bosco and members of the board. My name is Rodrigo Garcia, and I will be presenting the Hermosa Beach Parking Lot Greening Project. Staff recommends that the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $433,650 of Proposition 1 funds to the City of Hermosa Beach to renovate an impervious and deteriorated beach parking lot into a green, multi-benefit parking lot and to prepare final design plans to renovate a second parking lot in the City of Hermosa Beach. The proposed project is divided into 2 components: the renovation of Parking Lot D and the design of Parking Lot A. Both parking lots are located within 2 blocks of the beach, as shown in this map, in the incredibly popular city of Hermosa Beach, and are heavily used year-round by tourists looking to enjoy the different coastal activities that the city has to offer. Surveys have shown that many visitors come from a surrounding radius of 5 to 10 miles. Within this distance, there are nearly 500,000 residents living in disadvantaged communities, including the city of Lawndale and the city of Hawthorne, for whose residents Hermosa Beach is a popular recreation destination. The parking lot's current condition needs improvement for both water quality and public enjoyment. They are currently paved with impervious asphalt with no planters or areas for stormwater to infiltrate, causing rainwater to flow into the ocean, carrying pollutants into the Santa Monica Bay. Visitors have also expressed safety concerns from inadequate lighting and health concerns from dust originated from the unvegetated areas. The renovation of Parking Lot D will address water quality issues by capturing stormwater through different technologies, including a permeable paver system and dry wells and a bioswale planter that will promote infiltration of site runoff. Additional infrastructure improvements to Parking Lot D that will enhance public use include ADA accessibility upgrades, solar panels, and improved lighting to address safety concerns, electric vehicle charging stations, a bike corral, landscaping including the planting of 8 trees to address the need for carbon sequestration, gathering spaces, and street furnishings. The site will also feature interpretive signage explaining its multi-benefit design elements. For the second component of the project, the design of Parking Lot A, the city will engage stakeholders and community groups to create a collaborative design process. The city will use lessons learned in the design and construction of Parking Lot D to inform and optimize the design of this lot. The renovation of these parking lots will create a more inviting experience for Californians looking to enjoy the beauty that Hermosa Beach has to offer. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Are there any comments or questions? Any?
I just wanted to note that it's great to see that the city is actually putting in more money than the state on this one. So it's a nice partnership.
Rodrigo, I'd like to comment that it's nice to see you presenting these projects now. You've advanced quite a bit with the Conservancy in a really great style and manner. Are there any public
Thank you, Chair.
comments?
It looks like we have one, and that's Robert Vanderhoek.
Well, no, we don't have one then. Let's go ahead with our agenda. Who would like to move approval?
Now you have a hand up from Marcia Hanscom as well.
Marcia Hanson, I think you qualify as also a repeat performer, but I'm going to let you go ahead, but we don't want people to comment on every item that we have, so go ahead. Go ahead.
My name's Marcia Hanscom. I didn't hear what you don't want people to comment about because I was being changed into being a participant. So whatever it is you're trying to control about my comments, I don't know what it is, but I do know what I heard you say earlier to another member of the public, and I believe you're in violation of the Bagley-Keene Act. You don't get to tell people what they are allowed to speak on or how many times they get to speak. You can require that they speak on a specific item, and I would like to speak on this item. And what I'd like to say is I agreed with Board Member Notoff. I think that it's great that the city is putting funding in. I also wanted to make sure you're all aware that the federal government may have funding to put into some of these projects in the future too. Our Congress member, Ted Lieu, has been pushing a bill to, well, maybe I'll get to tell you about it some other time because clearly, Mr. Bosco, you don't want to hear from some of us. Thank you.
Okay, do I hear a motion that we approve item 8?
So moved, Madam, or Mr. Chair, excuse me.
Okay, Ms. Miller moves, and a second from someone. Ms. Notoff seconds. Ann, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Notoff?
Aye.
Mr. Padilla?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Aliotto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 8 is approved.
Okay. Now we will go on to agenda item 9, and Evan Sloan will present that.
Thank you, Chair Bosco and members of the Conservancy. I am Evan Bergnes-Sloan, a project specialist in the South Coast region. For this item, staff recommends the Conservancy authorize the disbursement of up to $890,000 to the San Diego Unified Port District to implement and monitor a native oyster living shoreline project at the Chula Vista Wildlife Reserve in San Diego County. Funds for this authorization derived from a grant to the Conservancy of $960,533 from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Program specifically for this project. The remaining $70,533 in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service grant funds will be used to pay for Conservancy staff project management costs. The San Diego Bay Native Oyster Living Shoreline Project will restore 2.5 acres of native oyster habitat at the Chula Vista Wildlife Reserve in South San Diego Bay, as you can see in the red bubble on the right. The goals of this project are to create a native oyster reef that will increase shoreline resilience to climate change by reducing local wave action and shoreline erosion, and create new habitat for ecologically and commercially important wildlife. With the proposed funding, the project will install reef elements called reef balls made of sand, rock aggregate, cement, and oyster shell. Reef balls provide hard substrate necessary for natural native oyster settlement. Oyster shell is added to the mix to increase structural and complexity of the reef ball surface to further facilitate native oyster establishment. Approximately 360 reef balls will be installed across the 10 acres of mudflats at 2 different tidal elevations. Installing the elements at 2 tidal elevations will allow us to analyze the impact of tidal height on oyster establishment and collect data on invasive species, species diversity, and oyster survival and growth. The project was also designed to maximize reduction of wave energy at the shoreline and promote sediment accretion, which will continue to build the shoreline over time. The experimental design of this project will continue to increase knowledge of best practices for native oyster living shoreline projects in California. On the left, you can see some reef ball samples that were created for this project. And on the right, you can see an example of a reef ball before installation and after installation with native oysters recruited. San Diego Bay was historically a shallow water system with significant intertidal habitat. However, decades of dredging and channelization have resulted in a loss of over 90% of all intertidal habitat since the late 1800s. This habitat loss, along with pollution and overharvesting, have resulted in a drastic loss of native oyster habitats across San Diego Bay. Native oysters were once habitat forming, meaning they formed expansive oyster beds, which provided an important food resource from the 1600s to the early 1900s. Additionally, shoreline armoring, the dominant shoreline type in San Diego Bay, continues to exacerbate this trend of wetland loss, causing increased rates of erosion on armor adjacent lands, preventing natural shoreline processes and sediment flows, and providing little to no functional habitat for aquatic species. The loss of shallow water and salt marsh habitats has increased the vulnerability of the Bay's shoreline communities to extreme weather events and flooding, and we anticipate additional losses as a result of climate change-driven sea level rise and tidal inundation. Living shorelines present a resilient response to these concerns, providing an ecologically stable alternative to the destructive effects of shoreline armoring. In this photo, you can see a view of the project area at the Chula Vista Wildlife Reserve today. With the proposed funding, the port will also implement a 5-year monitoring plan to determine the success in terms of the project's biological and physical goals. For the restoration, the monitoring plan will focus on the benefits to algae, invertebrates, submerged aquatic vegetation, fish, and birds. For the physical goals, the monitoring plan will analyze wave attenuation, sediment accretion, shoreline progradation and erosion, and water quality. Beyond the 5-year period, the port will include the restored oyster reef within the physical extent of the port's ongoing eelgrass survey monitoring that is conducted every 3 to 5 years, as well as the port's fish monitoring program that is conducted every 5 years. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Evan. Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Alioto.
Thank you. Just a quick question for you. This is within the preserve or within the reserve itself, right? So fishing regulations are limited or non-existent, or it is, I should say, it is regulated to prevent from fishing and harvesting.
I believe so, because it is within the wildlife reserve.
Okay, are there any other questions? Any public comment?
You have one public comment, and that is Robert Vanderhoek.
Mr. Vanderhoek, are you out there?
Yeah, he's coming in.
I am here, Robert Jan van de Hoek. Welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and it is a right to speak, and so I appreciate it. And I do
Please speak on the subject matter. That is our prerogative as well. So speak on the subject matter.
Part of the subject matter is that I'm speaking for 1 minute, and I just wanted to say I thank you for that opportunity to still speak for 1 minute. And I approve of this project as far as I know. I missed some of the staff report by Evelyn Sloan, but what I did hear was good. And eelgrass is an important species to recover. It's a nursery for a lot of fish and invertebrates, animals without backbones. And for the plant itself is important in itself, and algae that attach to the eelgrass as well. It's really important, and oysters are important. And I think this is one of the places where oysters are genuinely native. But Yeah, so thanks. And I think it was good to have just 1 minute on this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, are there other public comments?
I'm not seeing any.
All right, who would like to move? Mr. Padilla? Move.
I second.
And Mr.
I second.
Brian?
It's Joe.
Oh, okay, on Mr. Aliotta seconds, that we approve item 9. Will you please call the roll, Ann?
Yes, sir. Miss Noddle?
Aye.
Mr. Padilla?
Aye.
Mr. Cash? Miss Miller? Aye. Mr. Alioto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 9 was approved.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to agenda item number 10, and Evan Sloan will present that one as well.
Thank you, Chair Bosco and members of the Conservancy. I am Evan Borgness Sloan, a project specialist in the South Coast region. For this item, staff recommends the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $151,869 to the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation to collect topographical map data, analyze the impacts of sea level rise on rocky intertidal habitat, and identify potential restoration and enhancement areas across San Diego County. This project is important because rocky intertidal habitat is incredibly unique with great biodiversity. Rocky intertidal areas provide critical foraging and resting habitat for a diversity of marine, coastal, and terrestrial organisms. However, rocky intertidal habitat is extremely sensitive to sea level rise. The Nature Conservancy and the Coastal Conservancy conducted a statewide analysis of coastal habitat vulnerability to sea level rise and found that 58% of the state's rocky intertidal habitat is highly vulnerable. And although this critical habitat is vulnerable across the state, there is no existing plan for how these habitats can be enhanced or restored to facilitate sea level rise adaptation. This project will provide a projection of the ecological consequences of sea level rise by mapping topography and available rocky habitat areas and overlaying sea level rise projections in San Diego County. The final phase of the project will be to identify areas for inland migration of rocky intertidal habitats to help these areas persist in the face of sea level rise. This is the first time rocky intertidal habitat will be identified for sea level rise adaptation and enhancement in Southern California. There is an incredible data set of rocky intertidal species called the Multi-Agency Rocky Intertidal Network, or MARINE. MARINE has been collecting data of the habitat associations and tidal range for all rocky intertidal species at 165 sites along the West Coast from Baja California to Washington State for the past 25 years. In this slide, I'm showing species richness on the left and percent rocky habitat on the right to demonstrate the breadth of this existing data set. While we have this amazing data, we do not have the elevation data needed to understand how and where these species can go as sea levels rise, which is where this project comes in. More specifically, funds for this authorization will be used to conduct the unmanned aerial vehicle surveys to develop a digital elevation model, or DEM, of the San Diego coast. Next, it will integrate the species associations from the marine data set onto the DEM, and then analyze sea level rise vulnerability by overlaying current sea level rise projections onto the DEM. Next, it will identify areas for potential rocky intertidal habitat migration and restoration, and finally develop online maps to visualize the results. The results of this project will allow local and state land managers to make more informed policy and management decisions for implementing coastal enhancement projects in rocky tidal habitats along the San Diego coast. While previous studies have identified rocky intertidal habitat as one of the most vulnerable to sea level rise in California, there is not any information or any pilot projects examining local impacts to rocky intertidal species in San Diego or the potential actions to mitigate the impacts of sea level rise. The proposed project will identify key areas of concern across the county and provide information on habitat enhancement methods and locations to facilitate the inland migration of these rocky intertidal areas of concern. Following this project, the project's methods could be expanded throughout the state to answer the same key management decisions. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Evan. Are there any questions from the board?
I just wanted to note that this seems like a good use of funds for a relatively reasonable amount of money to actually make the rich data set usable.
Okay.
Happy to move approval.
Okay, first, are there any public comments on the?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, could I just ask one question?
Yes.
For the criteria we discussed earlier, is part of our intent when we collect data from these projects to kind of feed that into a more central database and then use those data to influence other projects that we approve? Is there any consideration of that? I love the way that we're going to use these data to sort of inform other projects. I just wonder if there's been any thought to how we could better do that.
Evan, did you hear the question?
Oh, I heard the question. I just thought it was maybe a question for other staff. Well, this data set will be publicly available. All of the marine data is online and can be accessed by anyone who has access to the internet. But we haven't specifically thought about Ms. Miller's question for this project.
Yeah, I mean, certainly nothing urgent, but as we sort of think about data informing criteria, it would just be nice to see if we centralize some of these data, as you've said they are, and then so that they can inform future decisions. I think that would be a nice way for us to start thinking about different ways that funding could work more efficiently in the future as we look to other bonds and funding sources. It's just a thought. We would love your thoughts now or at a later date.
Okay, are there any public comments on this project to analyze the impact of sea level rise on rocky intertidal habitat?
I'm not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
All right, then, Jill, were you going to move approval of this project?
I
Okay.
think Ms. Nodoff moved, but I'm happy to second.
Oh, all right, I knew one of you did. And okay, Ms. Nodoff moves, Ms. Miller seconds that we approve item 10. Ann, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Nodoff,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Aliotto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. Item number 10 is approved.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again, Erin.
Thank you.
Next, we will go on to item 11, and Marilyn Latta will report that item.
Good morning, Chair Bosco and members of the board. Staff recommends authorization to disperse up to $1 million to the City of Richmond for construction of a 1.25 mile segment of the San Francisco Bay Trail, connecting Point Melati Beach Park to the Wine Haven Historic District in Contra Costa County, and adoption of findings pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. On October 17, 2019, the Conservancy recommended this project for inclusion in the 2019 Priority Conservation Area Grant Program, a program of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. MTC accepted the recommendation, and now staff are requesting Conservancy authorization to disperse Proposition 84 funds for this project. The Point Melati site is in the City of Richmond, just north of the Richmond Bridge. This section of shoreline offers spectacular views across San Francisco Bay, framed by the bridge, Mount Tamalpais, and East Brother Light Station. Backed by the 400-foot-high ridgeline of the Potrero Hills, the inland landscape features coastal bluffs, and the shoreline has a rich and varied cultural history, including the Richmond Beltline Railroad that went through this site. The trail is planned to be constructed on the former railroad easement and will follow the shoreline between Point Melati Beach Park and Stenmark Drive at the northern border of the Point Melati property. The beach park has a paved parking lot for 25 cars, plus a large crushed rock surface overflow parking area. It is an ideal trailhead for the Bay Trail and has been designated as a Bay Area Water Trail site. The project is just south of the Terminal 4 Wharf Removal Project, another Conservancy project on the consent calendar today in partnership with the city, and this proposed trail will provide access that will link to future segments that extend north after the wharf is removed. The project consists of construction of 1¼ miles of multi-use, all-weather, Americans with Disabilities Act compliant trail, comprising a 10-foot wide asphalt concrete surface and a 5-foot wide decomposed granite surface on the bay side. The project includes installation of benches, trash receptacles, and educational exhibit panels. The benches will be placed strategically along the trail for resting and enjoying the scenery that includes sweeping views of the bridge and bay in Marin County. The project is part of a collaboratively planned trail effort between East Bay Parks and the city, connecting with another 1¼ mile trail segment directly to the south, which starts at the base of the east side of the Richmond Bridge. East Bay Parks completed the environmental documentation required by CEQA for both segments, 2½ miles total, and has prepared and submitted permit applications to the regulatory agencies for both segments. East Bay Parks and the city have successfully raised grant funds and will continue to coordinate so that both segments are bid and constructed at the same time, achieving efficiency and collaboration. The trails will connect to the Richmond Bridge and the newly completed bike trail, which means many people from Marin County and all over the Bay Area can get to it. Trails for Richmond Action Committee will design and install educational exhibit panels that will interpret the rich cultural history of the area and natural features such as eelgrass beds offshore. The Point Mulati site history includes the Huichin tribe of Ohlone Native Americans, a Chinese shrimping village that was in existence from 1871 to 1912, and after that a 41-acre wine haven district, once known as the largest winery in the United States from 1908 to 1920. The site was also the prior home of the United States Naval Fuel Depot from 1942 to 1995, which is now decommissioned. Some of these topics will be the focus of future interpretive panels. The project will provide new recreational opportunities for underserved youth and other residents of Richmond's disadvantaged communities, since the trailhead is only 2 to 3 miles from the nearest disadvantaged neighborhood. Although more than a mile distant, this trail will serve the nearby Atchison Village, Iron Triangle, Coronado, and Santa Fe neighborhoods. This is made possible by safe, attractive, protected bikeways recently installed by the city. The project is supported by the California Natural Resources Agency Prop 68 Trails and Greenways Grant Program, State Senator Nancy Skinner, State Assembly Member Buffy Wicks, MTC Commissioner Federal Glover, BCD Commissioners Tom Butt and John Goya, the Bay Trail Project, the Bay Area Water Trail, Bike East Bay, Rich City Ride, Pogo Park, and Save the Bay. Thank you, and I would like to welcome Lena Velasco from the City of Richmond and Bruce Bayert from TRAC to say a few words.
Hello.
Hi, Chair Bosco. This is Marilyn Latta, and I believe we have Lena Velasco from the City of Richmond and Bruce Bayert from TRAC, who would just like to say thank you briefly.
Okay.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Lena Velasco, Community Development Director for City of Richmond. And first of all, we'd like to thank the Conservancy as well as staff for their support, ongoing support of enhancing public access to the Bay. The Point Mulati Bay Trail project will provide new public access to the scenic San Francisco Bay of the City of Richmond's 413-acre property via an active transportation trail. The shoreline has a rich, varied cultural history, including a Chinese shrimping camp, wine haven, which was once proclaimed as the largest winery in California, as well as the Naval Fuel Depot that was active during World War II. So we're very excited to welcome the public, and this funding will help us do that to the San Francisco Bay and the Point Mulati property. So thank you again for your support.
Thank you. Mr. Bayert?
Hello, my name is Bruce Bayert. I'm the chair of TRAC, the Trails for Richmond Action Committee, and our mission is to complete the Bay Trail in Richmond. Richmond has over 36 miles of Bay Trail built, more than any other city in the 9-county Bay Area. Yet there are 4 miles yet to be built on the Point San Pablo Peninsula. And this project is a key to proceeding with that project. It will be really important and well used because there have been over 110,000 bicycle trips across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge since it opened mid-November 2019. And those bicyclists arriving from both the East Bay and North Bay are going to welcome the opportunity to view the scenic Point Malati Bay Trail. So thank you for all your support. I'd like to especially thank Marilyn for her great staff report and presentation today. She and I go back more than a decade when she was working with staff at Save the Bay and I was on the board. So thank you all. We appreciate your consideration of this grant request.
Well, thank you for your hard work too. We appreciate it a lot. Okay, are there any public comments on the Point Malati project that we're considering?
I'm not seeing any hands up. I do want to let the record show that Brian Cash has rejoined us, and also that I was one of those 120,000 bike trips over the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge.
Great. Well then, Brian, do you want to move approval of this item? Since you're back?
I do, yes.
All right, and who would like to second it?
I second Alioto.
Okay, Joe Alioto. Anne, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Noddle?
Aye.
Mr. Padilla?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Alioto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passes. Item number 11 is approved.
Okay, and thank you, Marilyn. Good work. Good
Thank
project.
you so much. Is that you?
We'll now go on to item 12, and Michael Bowen will be presenting that item on the North Coast.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bosco and members of the board. My name is Michael Bowen, and I'll be your project manager for items 13, 14, and 15 on the North Coast portion of today's agenda. Today, we begin with the Mad River Floodplain and Public Access Enhancement Project. Today, I seek your authorization to disperse up to $652,938, including $376,754 from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Grant Program to California Trout to implement the Mad River Floodplain and Public Access Enhancement Project along the Mad River in Humboldt County, California, and adopt findings under the California Environmental Quality Act. The Mad River, historically a tributary to Humboldt Bay, lies just north of Eureka, near the town of McKinleyville. The project site is an approximately 9-acre site owned by the McKinleyville Community Services District, or district. In the 1980s, the district constructed percolation ponds in the floodplain to dispose of wastewater. However, that practice was soon discontinued and the site was abandoned. The district is now working as lead agency under CEQA with its partners to restore habitat and provide public access at the site. In this photo, looking south, the project site is located along the left bank at the end of School Road. The ponds are visible along the left bank in the upper right of the photo. Here, looking north now, the abandoned ponds appear on the right bank as an arrow pointed towards the sea. Under the proposal, California Trout and the district would grade the project site to create a variety of riparian habitat features that existed prior to the extensive armoring of the riverbanks, and then remove the levee separating the river from the ponds, allowing the river to reclaim its floodplain. Built habitat features would include backwater channels that provide low-energy environments for juvenile and adult fish to rest during high flow events, and a replanted gallery forest used by a variety of birds. This series of photos shows a typical levee removal project that restores the type of low energy, high productivity floodplain habitat that promotes healthy vegetated banks, rich food webs, and healthy fish populations. Here on Marin County's Lagunitas Creek, a mini ghost town was removed from the floodplain to make way for the river. This project also received Conservancy support. The project includes an exciting public access component, highlighted here in one of the proposed interpretive panels for the site. Caltrout and the district intend to build a parking area at the base of School Road and an improved nature trail into the project area. In addition, they intend to build a non-motorized boat launch along the river for fishermen and other recreational boaters. The interpretive panels, developed in conjunction with local artists and the Wiyot tribe, convey the rich cultural legacy of the project area, as well as the vision for the future project. With that, I'd like to conclude my presentation and open it up for any questions the board may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any public comments on the Mad River project?
We do have one public comment. That's Mary Burke from Caltrout. Why don't we go ahead and bring her on in? Before we get to her though, I just wanted to brag a little bit this year because 8 out of 9 of the NICWIC projects we applied for were awarded by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So Michael and a number of his colleagues had a very successful year in getting funding from the federal government. We got a total of $7 million awarded for our projects. They're not all going to come to you, all at once. They come as they are. They come as they're ready. But I thought you might like to know that we had a very successful fundraising year, at least with this federal program, and Michael was one of our star fundraisers, and of course he's looking good there in a bow tie.
Yeah,
Congratulations. That's
I was going to ask if the feds give you extra credit for bow ties. Well, Michael's ties have always been a noticeable item, I think. Okay, go ahead, ma'am. Mary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, staff, and the public. I was also going to talk to Michael's ties, but his ties to this project. It's been a pleasure to work with Michael over the past 5 years. He's an incredible partner, very supportive, and it's been a great journey. So we're really happy, and I just want to thank you for favorably considering this project and point out a few interesting aspects. The landowner, as Michael pointed out, is the McKinleyville Community Services District, the largest form of government in our unincorporated community. And yes, I do live here, so it's really exciting to see this project moving towards implementation. That landowner, is making this great forward-thinking decision to return the floodplain connectivity and that habitat. I want to speak not only to the fish, but there have been 2 birds of the year for Humboldt County that have been found down in that floodplain. So it's a really rich area, and it's going to greatly benefit from the habitat. And then to build on the partnership between the district and the team with the Wiyot tribe, being able to incorporate the Wiyot tribe's work on integrating Wiyot language into the signage. And we're going to develop an additional sign to the package, which is going to speak to the cultural importance of this area. And also there's a Humboldt County Office of Education Redwood Adventures Quest program that's going to happen there, which is an exciting interactive brochure that brings people out to the site. So thank you again, really exciting to see this coming before you, and thanks for your long-term support for this and other projects.
Well, thank you, Ms. Bird. Thanks for the work that Caltrout does too, all over the region.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just a couple of brief things. First, as an error in my introduction, the items should have referenced items 12, 13, and 14, I believe, not 13, 14, and 15. So I apologize for that mistake in the pre-recording. And the other thing I wanted to note is that Caltrout has successfully raised from our partners at the Wildlife Conservation Board, it was too late for this staff report, but $367,745 for the public access component of the project. So I wanted to congratulate them on that successful fundraising for this exciting project. Thank you.
Great.
Amy Roach, were you gonna, yeah.
Yeah, Chair Bosco and members of the board, I just wanted to point out that the numbers Michael stated that we're requesting authorization for this project are a little different than what's stated in the written resolution before you. So I just wanted to ask Michael to clarify and confirm what the numbers are that are before you for this project, what we're recommending for disbursement.
Michael, do you have a number that we're recommending for disbursement?
Certainly I do. So the resolution should be a total of $634,823, of which $358,639 is from the Fish and Wildlife Services NICWIC grant.
Okay, that's a little bit different than what you had said in your presentation and what is in the financing section, which is
Yes, I apologize, and I think that I think the error here, which is also accounted for the error in the numbering, is that the revised presentation was not included in the board materials, and so it was later corrected. So the recording is in error, but the resolution and the staff recommendation should be correct.
All right, so our disbursement will be $634,823, correct?
That's correct.
All right.
And you have one public comment on this item, it looks like.
Okay.
So that's Robert Vanderhoek.
Mr. Vanderhoek, do you have a comment on the Mad River project?
Yeah, he's coming in.
Coming in.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Is it 1 minute?
Yep.
Yeah, that was a quick response. My name is Robert Jan van de Hoek, and I'm an environmental scientist and educator. I have expertise in Northwest California as well. I worked there, and I know about habitats along the seashore. And there is some merit to this, but there's a lot of things that could be improved also. I also am not feeling very confident anymore, and my morale has been crushed by this whole process. The last two items I wasn't allowed to participate in, and my hand remained down. It seems to be going to mute now. Am I still being heard?
Yes.
Being heard.
My video away. Okay.
So please comment on the project that we have before us.
That's right. So I'm going to not say anything anymore. You just crushed my lack of feeling involved in this, and I don't appreciate this at all. This is a violation of the law, and I'm glad Amy Roach counsel to help be able to record this for our lawsuit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion that we approve item 12?
I'll move, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Miller moves, and who wants to second it?
I second.
Alioto seconds that we approve item 12. Excuse me, Ann, will you call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Noddle,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 12 is approved.
Okay, we'll now go on to item number 13, again by Mr. Bowen. Michael?
Chairman Bosco, members of the board. For item 14, I present the Ocean Ranch Restoration Project. What you see before you, with the exception of the Wildcat Hills in the distance, is the 850-acre Ocean Ranch unit of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Eel River Wildlife Area, as seen from Table Bluff, which separates the Eel River Delta from Humboldt Bay. Today I seek your authorization to disperse a total of $4,547,520. This is comprised of $750,000 in conservancy funds, $1,821,938 from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Coastal Wetlands Grant Program funds, and $1,975,582 from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Wetlands Restoration for Greenhouse Gas Reduction Grant Program. These funds would be dispersed to Ducks Unlimited and for the Conservancy to retain environmental consultants to conduct the Ocean Ranch Restoration Project near Lolita in Humboldt County. This authorization would also include the adoption of findings under the California Environmental Quality Act. The Ocean Ranch Restoration Project is an ambitious undertaking comprising the entire 850-acre Ocean Ranch unit of the Eel River Wildlife Area. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife is unified, laser-focused, and uniquely positioned to begin restoration on nearly the entire north side of the Eel River estuary. Earlier investments in the Eel estuary are in close proximity. Just across the channel from Ocean Ranch is the recently restored Riverside Ranch, keystone and part of the Salt River Ecosystem Restoration Project. An extension of the Salt River Project into Williams Creek follows this item on today's agenda. Riverside Ranch is the southernmost portion of the Eel River Wildlife Area, as seen in shaded brown in the lower right inset map. Future investments are also planned. Cal Fish and Wildlife and Cal Trout and others are working on a restoration planning effort at Cannibal Island, strategically located between the Ocean Ranch unit and the Salt River Project. Cal Fish and Wildlife is assisted in their restoration efforts by Ducks Unlimited, which serves as project lead, designer, and construction manager. Focusing in on the project site, you can see that the thrust of the project is reclamation in reverse, by simply restoring full tidal exchange to a muted tidal system. This will be achieved by breaching a series of berms and excavating the beginning of channels to promote tidal exchange and channel formation. The project also includes a public access component. Plans call for improvements of a parking area and access road, as well as the installation of a non-motorized boat launch for hunters, fishermen, and recreational boaters. The project is divided into multiple components that will span the years 2021 to 2022 for construction and well beyond for enhancement and maintenance activities. Unique to this project is Cal Fish and Wildlife's plan to simultaneously treat the Ammophila, or European beachgrass, infesting the dunes, while also treating the Spartina densiflora infestation in the marsh. Project proponents certainly have their work cut out for them for invasive vegetation management, which will occur across the entire project area. Fortunately, Cal Fish and Wildlife and Ducks Unlimited can lean heavily on the programmatic environmental impact report funded and developed by the Coastal Conservancy and our own Joel Gerwine in 2013, which with foresight included the Eel River Delta in the Humboldt Bay Regional Plan. Cal Fish and Wildlife and its partners envision a fully restored salt marsh and unique dune community, extending the length of the north spit of the Eel River, from its mouth to Table Bluff. The area promises some dramatic future floral displays in the spring. The many aquatic species recolonizing and thriving in the nearby Salt River Project area are fully expected to expand into this newly restored habitat. And of course, people will benefit extensively. The Ocean Ranch unit is easily accessible off Highway 101, and it is big enough to offer a wide variety of activities for all visitors. And with that, I conclude my presentation and open it up to board questions and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Again, to remind everyone, we're on item 13. Are there any questions or comments for Michael? All right, are there any public comments?
I did have one question.
Fine.
Did you really say that there was an island named Cannibal Island?
It's the one question I hope to avoid. Yes, Board Member Cash, there is. And
okay.
All I can really say,
I just heard that and I thought, is that really what he said? Okay.
Well, in fact, we're having our next in-person board meeting on Cannibal Island. This beautiful project. Actually, every time we have a project on the North Coast, I remember the many times the board has gone up there to see Michael's projects, and they're always wonderful trips.
Yeah, this looks like a great project, Michael. Really appreciate all your work on this.
Mr. Alioto?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bowen, just a quick question for you. I'm curious about what the procedure is for the elimination of the invasive species that you mentioned. The group would have their work cut out for them. I'm just curious about how that process works in practice.
Absolutely. I'm going to begin with a quick response, but I also want to introduce Natalie Washburn of Ducks Unlimited, who is also here with us today, who has been working, who really deserves many more thanks and congratulations than I ever will for the Ocean Ranch project. She's been working so hard for very many years teeing this up. So the approach to Ammophila and Spartina removal at the Ocean Ranch project was actually in its very earliest inception, not even part of the project, but was spearheaded, I think, by some of the more ambitious and really energetic plant biologists at the Cal Department of Fish and Wildlife, who saw this great opportunity to really restore a huge dune habitat. And for their obviously different approaches for each. Initially, a lot can be taken with grading approaches. So if you're preparing for the project site, clearing and grading for restoration, some of that can be done that way. The EIR includes a variety of techniques, most notably burning, but it also includes, I think, CEQA coverage for aerial spraying and other techniques too. Natalie, do you want to take any additional comments or clarifications on that for Board Member Alioto?
I think you covered it. The permitting, a broad approach that includes burning under a approved burn plan with CAL FIRE, their partner, to complete that. It includes herbicide application, and it also includes some mechanical approaches depending on the areas of more dense or more sparse invasive vegetation.
And all of those techniques are in some sense certified environmentally sound practices.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the Conservancy has a long history of Spartina removal. In fact, I think we used to have our own Air Force or naval force to do it, but we've had many projects on Spartina removal. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah.
Are there public comments?
Yeah, we have one public comment, and that's Robert Jan Vanderhoek.
Mr. Vanderhoek, are you there?
He's coming in.
Coming
Takes
in.
a minute to bring him in.
Let me just say at this point, I wanted to interject and to say as the vice chair, I just wanted to clarify that certainly our intent is to just direct public testimony to the agenda item at hand, not to discourage public input. We certainly encourage public input. I just think we all need to be careful of each other and respect the process as we have these hearings in this remote format. They can be useful and they can also get bogged down. So I just wanted to clarify that we encourage public comment. We also need to respect each other's time and the specific item on the agenda.
Well taken comments. Go ahead, Mr. Vanderhoek.
Thank you. And my name is Robert Jan Vanderhoek. I do appreciate the attempt or effort of the correct pronunciation of my name by Mr. Schuket. Thank you, but it's not Jan, it's Jan. It's okay.
My Dutch is not what it used to be, sorry.
Right. And then the VAN is fun, like having fun at the fair. And it's Hoek, like in the name Luke. And it's, anyways, okay. Ms. Nothoff, thank you for that. I think that I'm not sure if that was directed towards me. I know I was present to hear you say that. It seems like it was meant for your board members and directors and staff. And I see you have Ms. Washburn of Ducks Unlimited there. And that brings to me concern because their mission, not unsure what Ms. Miller is laughing and smiling at, but it's really hurting my feelings. It's rather, so I really didn't get to make a comment because of how you guys, how all of you, ladies and gentlemen, are behaving. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve item 13?
Move approval.
Second.
Mr. Padilla moves and Ms. Nothoff seconds. Do we approve item 13?
That was Mr. Cash.
Oh, Mr. Cash seconds. Okay, sorry.
No, Mr. Cash moved.
Oh, Mr. Cash moved. All right. Then why don't we have Mr. Padilla second? All right.
Thank you. Yes.
I like it so much better when we're meeting in person.
Yeah.
All right, Ann, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Nothoff,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Aliotto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. Item agenda number 13 is approved.
Thank you, and thank you, Michael. Now we'll go on to item 14 that Michael Bowen will also present.
Chairman Bosco, members of the board, for my final presentation today, I seek your authorization to disperse up to $307,170 to the Humboldt County Resource Conservation District to conduct studies and prepare designs, permit applications, and a management plan for the Williams Creek Restoration Plan near Ferndale in Humboldt County, California. Williams Creek is one of the largest tributaries to the lower Eel River via the Salt River, which, as the name implies, is no river at all, but a tidal slough. Because the fates of Williams Creek and the Salt River are so intertwined, and because the Salt River project is such a venerable conservancy project, some 30 years in the making, I'll begin with a refresher on the Salt River project and its progress. Beginning with the project area, and as the pictures here demonstrate, there are two sides of Ferndale. One is that shown in tourist brochures, a quaint Victorian village at the foot of the Wildcat Hills, surrounded by bucolic and fertile pastures. The other side is winter, when the Eel River overtops its banks and reclaims its delta as it has done for countless millennia. No one resents this reality locally. As the locals say, the river has the first mortgage and the bank gets the rest. But floodwater is like a house guest. After 3 days, its welcome is worn out. If the estuary is functioning properly, the water drains naturally and efficiently with the tides. But alterations to the landscape over the last century caused channels to fill and drainage to diminish, and thus was born the Salt River Project. To be clear, the Salt River was never a river at all. It was, and is now again, a tidal slough that captured stream runoff from the Wildcat Hills, including from Williams Creek. The Conservancy provided the first ever grant to the newly formed Eel River Resource Conservation District, now the Humboldt Resource Conservation District, in 1989 to find relief for the local community and alternatives to restore the function of the Salt River, including the drainage of the Ferndale Bottom it historically provided. Unfortunately, that stage of the project died on the vine of insurmountable odds. Years later, the district, with the support of the Conservancy, took another tilt at the windmill. Under the capable local leadership of Supervisor Jimmy Smith, the district, the Conservancy, the Wildlife Conservation Board, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service acquired the 444-acre Riverside Ranch, shown here as the Phase 1 project area, transferred it to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and began design and construction of the project. Quickly, the district met with success and began reversing the trend of irreversible flooding and ponding. By restoring the original function of the estuary and its tributaries, the partners successfully restored drainage, enhanced surrounding pasture, while also restoring hundreds of acres of tidal marsh and 7 miles of tidal slough and freshwater channels, now occupied by coho and Chinook salmon, lamprey, and numerous other species. Newly re-excavated and restored channels provide newly restored drainage to surrounding agricultural lands and host newly restored aquatic habitat for countless species. This project restores the functions of historic features rather than trying to create artificial flood control contrivances. And nature abhors a vacuum. It has filled the Salt River Project area quickly with an abundance of life. Coho salmon, longfin smelt, and lamprey eel are amongst the many beneficiaries. Like so many projects that the Conservancy supports, our early support is critical to project success, and our reliable partnerships over the decades pay handsome dividends in the growth of important undertakings. The attached graph doesn't include all funding that has supported the Salt River Project. However, it shows that the Conservancy's early investments and involvement, now totaling about $3.5 million, have leveraged a public works project now exceeding $21 million in scale. This has provided high-value construction and restoration jobs for years in the disadvantaged community, benefiting the public and private sector in the process. The project has progressed steadily under construction since 2013. But as the timeline shows, the future has arrived. Here on the upper reaches of the Salt River, where half the natural flow of the upper watershed emanating from the rain-soaked Wildcat Hills attempts to enter the Salt River through a sediment-choked Williams Creek, hydraulic dysfunction and ecological disturbance still dominate. The district, in combination with the City of Ferndale and local residents, seeks solutions to the continued flooding in the upper reaches of the Salt, and are drafting a restoration plan to leverage the ecological and hydraulic benefits secured downstream in the completed portions of the Salt River Project. The district seeks your support of this plan. One aspect of the district's design will be the re-excavation of the Williams Creek Channel. A restored channel will connect the flow out of the Wildcat Hills with the newly restored Salt River. A new channel with backwater areas like that on the left will provide important migration and resting locations for salmon. Another concept under consideration is the construction of an in-channel sediment management area, such as the one constructed lower in the project area. The sediment management area functions like a floodplain, and although it takes valuable agricultural land out of production, it provides a defined location for sediment to decant and for the flow to be directed in a definite channel. Later, when waters recede, the sediment can be collected and used as an agricultural amendment locally. To recap, the district seeks $307,170 to design and prepare for implementation in 2022 the expansion of the Salt River Ecosystem Restoration Project into the Williams Creek watershed. Your consideration of the proposed project is appreciated, and I am available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Are there any questions from the board? Mr. Alioto?
Yes, first of all, Mr. Bowen, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your style and presentation. It's really fabulous, and I love to see and hear your creativity reflecting the dedication that you have to projects like this. My only question really is this a project where, I know you talked about the artificial contrivances of flood control and that this is not that. I just want to be sure, is the central goal of this project to return the land to its original environmental state? Or is it in other words, it is not an artificial flood control contrivance, as you put it?
That is a wonderful question, and thank you. And thank you for the compliment, by the way. I really appreciate it. It's a joy of an opportunity to have the opportunity, so I appreciate that. As I mentioned, the project has been, it's long in the tooth. And for every step of its journey, it has been a balancing act between a desire to maximize agricultural production and productivity in an extremely fertile area. It's almost year-round rainfall, moist, great growing conditions, no air conditioning required, no snow, all of these things that make it just a very verdant part of our state. It's been a balancing act between those desires and the desires of the community, the agricultural community in particular, with the desire to ensure that the investments also provide other public benefits that often aren't monetized, like ecological services, our salmon populations that once supported such a vibrant commercial fishery on the North Coast. And so the design has sought to, through various mechanisms, to marry those two goals and explain both the need to inject ecological services to the agricultural community and vice versa. And the RCD has walked a tightrope on that for decades now, and I think rather successfully. You know, a good example of this that's specific to this particular portion of the project would be, how large does the channel need to be? How much riparian habitat is acceptable? Because most of the project area is on private property. And so, striking that balance can be a ticklish business. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. My only concern about it is, I definitely support the project to the extent that it is assisting with fish habitat and the restoration of that land to an original state. I am a little concerned about whether or not we are charged and whether or not it falls within our goals to support agricultural interests. So that's why I raised the question. I'm just interested in what your thoughts are about that, maybe what other people's thoughts are about that.
So actually, Mr. Aliotto, support of agriculture in the coastal zone is prominent in our statute.
Okay.
So it's not just the community that's trying to balance those things. We have to balance it too, because you know, we've historically done quite a bit of work with different agricultural communities around the state about figuring out how to keep areas in agriculture.
Okay, excellent. I appreciate that clarification, and I note that, Mr. Bowen, your comment about walking the fine line because you're on private property, agricultural private property. So thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. That's very helpful for me.
I'd like to add a little bit to that too. Michael is almost always a very quiet, understated person, but he has had to deal with enormous controversy up there amongst property owners over a long period of time. And he's used his own diplomacy to advance the cause of the things you were talking about, Mr. Aliotto, is the fisheries and the natural restoration of this area. It didn't come at an easy price, believe me. He's worked very, very hard to get where we are up there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your efforts, Mr. Bowen, and I really appreciate the clarification on
Oh, sure. You know, on this topic, the Coastal Act, interestingly, was one of the most challenging statutes to navigate on this project, and for good reason, and for the reason you're raising, because it includes provisions to protect prime ag land in the coastal zone, and Riverside Ranch was mostly prime ag land. And commission staff, I really want to give a shout out to them because they navigated, I think, very successfully this balancing act that I referred to and that you're asking about, taking prime ag land out of production while also restoring habitat and providing flood benefits.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's terrific. Thank you.
thank you for the time.
Okay, if there are no further board comments, are there any public comments?
You have one.
Let me guess.
So let's put Roy on.
Mr. Vanderhook, do you want to make a comment?
He has to unmute.
You're on mute.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah, thank you. Robert Untitled, environmental scientist and educator, expert on the Northwest California coast. I'd like you to think about the greater Humboldt Bay ecosystem. By the way, Mr. Aliotto, you were awesome in asking your dichotomous question on that. And this does not restore or bring back it to a natural state historically. In the 1850s at statehood, we had a great survey of the state of California that showed that this was a freshwater system in Humboldt Bay. I had to walk several miles to get to the end of the jetties that's dredged by the Army Corps of Engineers to keep this bay open to the ocean so that big freighters for ag and for redwood logging and that some bygone era, but that's what's messing up Humboldt Bay, not what you're doing. And with sea level rise, you need to close. It's just, there's so much wrong with this project, and incorrect interpretation of Mr. Shook on the ag statute that says you have to do it. It does not. It's a false interpretation. Mr. Aliotto, you got that information from your director. Thank you.
All right. Do I hear a motion that we approve item 14? Okay. I'm sorry, who's making that? Oh, Gail. Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I'll second. I'll just note that I believe it was in that same survey in the 1850s that they observed grizzly bears feasting on whale carcasses in Morro Bay. So we can all, I hold that image in my mind often when I think of our California coast and what we have here.
Well, thank you. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve item 14. Those in, oh, Ann, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Notoff,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Hi.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda item 14 is approved.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Good work today. We'll go on now to yet another project on the North Coast that will be introduced by Sue Corberly.
Thank you, Chair Bosco and members of the State Coastal Conservancy. I seek your authorization to disperse up to $499,070 of Proposition 1 funds to the Eel River Recovery Project for Phase 2 of the 10 Mile Creek Water Conservation and Restoration Planning Project to prepare plans, designs, and environmental compliance documents for water storage and erosion control sites in Lower 10 Mile Creek. 10 Mile Creek flows from its headwaters southeast of Laytonville in Mendocino County, northerly for approximately 22 miles to its confluence with the South Fork Eel into an area designated as a wild and scenic river that is enjoyed by rafters, kayakers, and anglers. This project focuses on the lower 10 Mile Creek watershed below Highway 101, roughly between Streeter and Peterson Creeks, and on Cotto Creek. 10 Mile Creek is the domestic water supply for an economically disadvantaged community in the watershed, including the Cotto tribe of the Laytonville Reservation and the severely disadvantaged community of Laytonville. Conditions in 10 Mile Creek are deteriorating, primarily due to flow depletion, excess sediment supply, elevated water temperatures, and poor riparian conditions. You can see by this map from summer 2018 that most of the main stem 10 Mile was dry. These late summer low or no flow conditions are increasing in frequency and are having a direct impact to fish survival and to water quality and supply for surrounding communities. Although the historic substantial fisheries production in the South Fork Eel River system is now extremely diminished, 10 Mile Creek still supports Chinook, coho salmon, and steelhead populations, and the Pacific lamprey eel, the river system's namesake. National Marine Fisheries Service data show the 10 Mile Creek watershed was likely one of the most significant coho salmon producers in the Eel River watershed. This bodes well for population resilience if habitats are restored. In 2018, the Conservancy funded the 10 Mile Creek Water Conservation and Restoration Pilot Planning Project, a community outreach and planning effort to assess the health of the entire 10 Mile Creek watershed by documenting flows, temperature, and sedimentation, and to identify water conservation opportunities and strategies for Streeter and Big Rock Creeks. The long-term goals of the pilot project relate to both improving water sustainability and enhancing salmonid habitat by increasing flows, restoring riparian zones, and reducing erosion. The results of the pilot study, prioritized by need and opportunity, are detailed in the 10 Mile Creek Watershed Conservation and Restoration Action Plan, which is Exhibit 2 to the staff recommendation. The pilot study identified the west side tributaries of 10 Mile Creek as the priority water conservation area for focusing water storage and forbearance efforts. It also identified landowners ready and willing to participate in early planning for erosion control projects. As you can see in the image, this project is focusing on both water storage and erosion control planning within the west side watershed on 3 privately owned properties. The study found the largest water diversion of Streeter Creek occurs at Black Oak Ranch, a 600-acre communally owned property where water withdrawals provide irrigation for a large organic farm and water for Camp Win a Rainbow, a summer camp founded by the counterculture icon Wavy Gravy that hosts inner-city disadvantaged youth in the summer to learn about art, theater, and nature.
This project includes preparing designs, environmental documents, and permit applications for an off-stream storage pond with sufficient supply to meet the needs of the farm and camp, and for augmented tank water storage for the camp. This will enable both to forbear from late summer use of Streeter Creek in the future, resulting in increased flows. Continuing to focus on priority west side tributaries, this project will also conduct water supply modeling on Cotto and Mill Creeks, where landowners are interested in water forbearance. The pilot study cataloged stream bank and gully erosion sites throughout the watershed. As a result of our study, Eel River Recovery Project has received a 319H non-point source grant from the State Water Board to separately deal with the largest stream bank erosion sites on 10 Mile Creek. Conservancy funds, if authorized, will complete planning, environmental review, and permitting for many of the highest priority gully erosion sites, including those on the Vassar property on 10 Mile Creek and on the Varnhagen property on Cotto Creek. We expect these early projects to catalyze future opportunities for more erosion control work. Therefore, the project includes continuing outreach to the communities to bring additional landowners on board for erosion control work on their properties. Restoring 10 Mile Creek flow and reducing sediment is not only important for enhancing fish habitat and improving ecosystem function, but it is of vital importance to the communities served by the watershed. Planning is expected to begin this summer and be completed in summer of 2023. Eel River Recovery Project expects to apply for implementation funds for the gully work from the State Water Resources Control Board and California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and for water storage construction from the Wildlife Conservation Board. Thank you for your consideration of this project. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sue. Are there any questions for Sue Corbally? Are there any public comments?
Looks like we've got one, Mr. Chair. So
Right.
let's go ahead and put Robert in.
Mr. Vanderhoek, are you there?
He's coming on.
I'm here, and it's no R in the DE. It says it right there, DE, not DER, it's duh. Thank you very much, Robert Jan van de Hoek, and I appreciate your patience, Mr. Schuckett, too, with all my participation. I did some arithmetic and 15 items, so some I didn't get to testify. So I extended your meeting today by about 10 minutes. FYI for your information on this item, it's also another false project. That's not going to do good. It's going to feel good for you to do this, but it's not going to be effective. Restoration, we have countless studies now from Australia, Europe, elsewhere, that you have to let time take its course to heal land, to restore land. You can't speed it along, you can't accelerate it. There's all these other studies that show the botching that happens when you do these kind of fast projects to try to do this and that and throw money at it and say you've had a success. It's 1 year later, the restoration is successful. 10 years, it's not how it works. And you're really just throwing money away, and you're really hurting, and you're misinterpretation. You're doing miseducation, and to have these youth come from the inner city, wavy, getting more misinformation, it's just all wrong. You need reform. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, do I hear a motion that we approve item 15?
I'll move, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Miller moves, and who wants to second it? Oh, Mr. Padilla seconds. And please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Ms. Notoff?
Aye.
Mr. Padilla?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Aliotto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda item 15 is approved.
All right, thank you, Sue. We go now to item 16, and Tim Duff will present that.
Good morning, Chairman Bosco and Conservancy Board members. Item 17 recommends dispersing up to $436,395 including $386,395 awarded to the Conservancy by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to the Coastal San Luis Resource Conservation District to restore 56 acres of coastal habitat along Los Osos Creek in the lower Morro Bay watershed in San Luis Obispo County. The primary objective of the project is to restore hydrologic and ecosystem function at the site by facilitating the reestablishment of historic channels and floodplains along the creek. Enhancing wetlands along Los Osos Creek and reducing sediment flows to the Morro Bay National Estuary has been a high priority for the Conservancy for the past 30+ years. The project will implement the final site plans prepared with Conservancy funding that call for removal of culverts located along a dirt road that provides access to an abandoned home site on the property and to an agricultural well on an adjacent property. As shown in the upper right of this slide in red and black, the culverts will be replaced with a seasonal rocked forward crossing to improve fish passage. Above that location, the road leading to the abandoned homestead will be removed after it is demolished, and the home's septic tank and domestic well are decommissioned. In addition, 755 feet of levee will be removed to allow the creek to flow onto the adjacent floodplain, and existing utility poles will be realigned or removed from the floodplain. This slide shows the entrance to the road that runs through the wetland and riparian habitat that will be modified with the rocked crossing. This slide provides an example of the type of rocked forward crossing that will be installed. When completed, the project will restore 40 acres of coastal wetlands and 16 acres of upland coastal dune scrub habitat. Restoring wetlands will improve water quality both at the site and downstream by reducing nitrates and other pollutants entering the estuary. Rearing habitat and stream passage for the south central coast steelhead trout will be enhanced, as will foraging, breeding, and high-flow refuge habitat for tidewater goby and red-legged frog. The restoration of upland coastal dune scrub will benefit habitat for the federally listed Morro shoulder-band snail and the Morro manzanita. Local, state, and federal officials and agency staff have been engaged in this project, including attending site visits, providing technical assistance and grant funding, and submitting letters of support, including letters from Senator Laird, County Supervisor Bruce Gibson, and the Morro Bay National Estuary Program. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff, including staff from the RCD, are also available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Do members of the board have any questions? All right, are there any public comments?
I'm not seeing any public comments.
Okay, who would like to move approval? Brian, you haven't done one yet for a while.
Sorry to interrupt. We do have one hand raised.
Oh, yeah, now we do, yeah.
I'll move approval too.
All right, well, let's get the motion, and then when we're finished with the comment, we can go for, who wants to second it when the time comes?
Are we going to hear public comment first? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, all right, let's have public comment.
I have a few notes here on the South Central Coast Morro Bay area referred to as an estuary. It's not an estuary. An estuary means mixing of salt and fresh water. And historically, Morro Bay was closed to the sea almost all the time, very little opening. And that little bit of salt water that came in only allowed salmon maybe to come in once in a while and other fish. But just wanted to make sure you get this correct. And because the bay was closed, gray whales were never in Morro Bay. They were outside of Morro Bay on the open coast and would wash up on the outer beach, Miss Nothoff, in terms of that. So grizzly bears did feed them, but not in Morro Bay. Morro Bay was closed to the sea, so whales wouldn't go in. I don't think this project is going to help the tidewater goby. It happens to do best when you don't have seawater and you have fresh water. So a lot of issues with the federally endangered species. So I think you're violating the Endangered Species Act on this project too. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Cash, did you want to move approval? And then who'd like to second it?
I'll second.
Mr. Aliota seconds. Okay, Ann, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Noddle?
Aye.
Mr. Padilla?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Aliota?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passes. Item number 16 is approved.
All right, thank you, Tim. We'll go on now to our last project, item 17, and Hillary Hill will present that.
Thank you, Chairman Bosco and members of the Conservancy for the opportunity to present the Moran Lake Restoration and Public Access Planning Project. Staff recommends that the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $360,000 from Proposition 84 and Proposition 1 funds to Santa Cruz County Parks to prepare technical analyses, design plans, environmental review documents, and permit applications for water quality and public access improvements and habitat restoration at Moran Lake County Park in Santa Cruz County. As shown on the map, Moran Lake County Park is located in an unincorporated area of Santa Cruz County between the cities of Capitola and Santa Cruz. Moran Lake is a coastal lagoon, and as you can see in this aerial, it's part of an urban watershed. Nearly 95% of the watershed has been developed. Immediately surrounding Moran Lake are residential neighborhoods and a sanitation facility, and of course, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Moran Lake suffers from poor water quality and habitat degradation, which has been well documented since the 1970s. Urbanization that has paved and altered water flows has increased the amount of stormwater runoff entering Moran Lake. Urban pollutants such as fecal coliform bacteria and fertilizers are present, which can lead to algal blooms and low oxygen levels in the water. Further, due to altered stream hydrology, the banks along Moran Lake and the riparian corridor are severely eroded, impairing water quality and threatening portions of the trail system in the park, as you can see on the photo on the left. Persistently poor water quality conditions at Moran Lake have contributed to low habitat quality, including impairing suitable habitat for the tidewater goby, a federally listed endangered species. Moran Lake is part of the 9-acre county park, which also features a parking lot and restrooms, access to an adjacent sandy beach, trails along the riparian corridor that connect inland to neighboring communities, and a eucalyptus grove that harbors one of the largest wintering colonies of monarch butterflies in Santa Cruz County. The park's central location within the county, combined with free parking, restroom, and beach access, appeals to visitors not only from adjacent neighborhoods, but the greater region as well. With this grant, county parks will conduct planning to address the water quality and habitat degradation issues at Moran Lake County Park, but also improve public access amenities. It's a classic Conservancy multi-benefit project. This grant will allow Santa Cruz County Parks to plan for a variety of water quality improvement and habitat restoration features. This diagram shows conceptual plans for improvements, which will be further studied, designed, and go through environmental review and permitting if this grant is awarded. These elements were identified in previous planning work and will be developed further in coordination with a technical advisory team and through community engagement. These improvements include bank stabilization and revegetation, which will reduce erosion and sedimentation, restoration of fringe wetlands and upland habitats to improve water quality and habitat function, and installation of bioswales to filter contaminants before they reach the creek and lagoon, and eventually the Pacific Ocean. The mouth of the lake is constrained by a box culvert under East Cliff Drive, and as part of the project, county parks will complete a hydrology monitoring and modeling study to better understand what effects this configuration has on water quality, as well as projected impacts from sea level rise. Public access features that will be planned for as part of this project include relocating main trails further from eroding banks, updating restroom and parking facilities to be accessible for persons with disabilities, and installing interpretive signage educating visitors of the ecological significance of Morin Lake and its greater coastal watershed. This planning effort will result in a project that will not only improve the overall ecological health of the area, but also improve visitor experience of this natural park. As you'll find in the exhibits of the staff report, the project has overwhelming support from local partners and legislators. Thank you for your consideration, and if you have any questions about the project, I'm available to answer them now. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Are there any questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Cash.
I was just curious, how does the lake connect with the ocean right now?
Yeah, so there's a box culvert under East Cliff Drive, and so it's actually below the sand level of the beach. So depending on the tide and the wave height, they are connected during some times of the year.
So is the thought to later through the planning kind of look and figure out what the most ideal situation would be there between?
Yeah, so part of this study is analyzing what effect that configuration has on the lagoon water quality and analyzing what we expect to see with sea level rise to evaluate what the options are. So there won't be detailed plans for what that will be, but it's a first step to understanding what alternatives and are available to addressing that area.
Seems like over time, the ocean's just going to come in that lake anyway.
Yeah, that road will definitely need to be addressed in the future as well. So that will be in collaboration with Santa Cruz County Public Works.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments? Are there any public comments?
We have one public comment. That's from Robert.
Okay. Mr. Vanderhoek, are you there? Vanderhoek.
Hi, my name is Robert Jan van de Hoek, and environmental scientist and environmental educator. Thank you for the opportunity to speak for 1 minute and come on this last item. And Mr. Cash, I appreciate you attempting to inform and the staff to reply. A couple of quick questions. You might want to speak to the tidewater goby and be like a goby whisperer to find out what that fish wants. It was put on the United States Endangered Species Act, largely by Dr. Cam Swift, who did a survey statewide, and he found that fish to be extremely abundant there. So everything's going good in Moran Lake as is with the algae and the fecal material. That's all really good for the nutrient. This is our delta smelt of the California coast. Tidewater is kind of a false name for the goby because it's really always protected from the tides, actually. And I think this project is going to hurt that fish and cause it to go away. I don't think sea level rise is an issue to even be thinking about, at least for several decades. And there's much more I could have said as a hydrology expert. But, please do the project in Spanish and the emerging language, think of the Indian language that's, they're working on a vocabulary now on the whole California coast for the different tribes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Are there any other comments from the board?
Yeah, a quick question. This is just an environment. These are just planning, right? You don't have any project in place at this point, and whatever planning you might have would address any concerns about the goby.
That's correct. This is just for designs and permitting.
Great, thank you.
All right, who would like to move approval of this?
Sorry to interrupt again. We do have one public comment. Will is actually on.
All right.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Will Ford. I'm a park planner with the County Parks Department for Santa Cruz. And I just wanted to say thank you from the folks at County Parks and from the community in Pleasure Point. Moran Lake's a really important part of the coastal landscape here. And we are so excited to work on this project moving forward. So this is going to really help us overcome an initial hurdle of going through the community planning process and going through the initial permitting and environmental review. So this will set us up to do other projects and really implement this. And we're really excited to work on this project. Thank you.
Well, thank you too for your work. All right, we have a motion to approve item 18.
I move to approve 18.
It's
I'll second.
17, isn't it?
17, thank you.
17.
17?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, Brian, were you the one that moved it or who did?
Alioto.
Oh, okay. Mr. Alioto moved, Ms. Miller seconded, I believe, that we approve item 17. Ann, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Noddle,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco,
Aye.
and this motion passes. Item 17 is approved.
All right. Well, that concludes the project portion of our agenda. We now move on to Conservancy member comments. Are there any? All right, if not, Sam, do we need a closed session?
No, we don't. All quiet on the legal front.
Good. Okay, that concludes our agenda. Our next meeting will be on May 27th. And of course, it will be a virtual meeting again. And thank you all.
Hey, Sam, is that your last meeting?
That will be my last meeting.
No, that's sad. That'll be
It is sad.
I'll dress up. I won't wear Crocs. How's that?
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that everyone wear a bow tie for the next meeting in honor of Sam.
Even the ladies?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a great idea. Although, how will we know how to tie it?
Exactly.
I can help with that.
Okay, good. Send a tutorial ahead of time, please.
You know, they used
But,
to have,
Sam, after COVID, will you come back so we can honor you along at a field trip along the coast?
Yeah.
He'll probably ride his bike there.
At one of the projects.
I'd love a party.
Okay, good.
We all will, sure.
you know, they used to have the bow ties that you could kind of cheat, you know, and flip it on like this. I would have to use that. I've never learned how to tie a bow tie. Well, thank you all and have a very nice rest of the day and good seeing you all even.
Good to see everyone and
Great seeing everybody.
See you.
Have a
Thank you
great,
all.
have a
thanks
great
for
time.
managing Zoom hearings. Thank you.
Take care,
Yeah.
everyone.
All righty,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.